Chapter 1430. After the soul poison was released, no matter how powerful it was, the non-poisonous which would not be able to witness it, because he had already died and no longer existed in this world. The soul poison that was poisonous in the world was extremely poisonous. It did not stop because of the death of the non-poisonous witch. The shocking black line continued to move forward on the Tao ancestor's hand. It went all the way to his elbow and finally could not go any further. However, it twisted there and did not retreat at all. The flood and the blazing fire ice abyss. Dan Kong saw that the non-poisonous witch had died and let out a miserable cry. Non-poisonous witch! Brother! However, no matter how the great witches called out, the non-poisonous witch who no longer existed in the world could no longer give them any response. The black line was still circling around the Tao ancestor's wrist. There were faint signs of expansion, and it seemed to be ready to attack. The Tao ancestor knew that this poison was special. He made a prompt decision and cut a hole in his finger. Then, a wisp of blood splashed out. The blood was as black as ink, but the black line on his arm did not show any signs of fading. In an instant, Zhuochanglu's sky patrolling blade, Wu Yuding's rain-listening sword, the Flood Witch's Thousand Souls hammer, Demon Emperor Dong Huang and the others. At this moment, they could no longer care about the formation. They all pounced forward and used all their best moves. At this moment, they could not let the Tao ancestor catch his breath. One of the 3 golden lotuses on the Tao ancestor's head was missing because of the attack just now. However, the golden lotus under his feet was still there, and so was the colorful cloud. Obviously, this was the external incarnation technique. The missing golden lotus replaced the Tao ancestor and disappeared under the joint attack of Zhuoxiaoduo and Zhuoxiaonian. What's more, the Tao ancestor's body was still poisoned by the soul poison that was like a maggot attached to the bone. However, since the start of the battle, he had also lost one of Zhuoxiaoduo's trump cards. The non-poisonous which was not known for his combat power, but for his poison power. Zhu Yan, another expert in the way of poison, was still hiding in the space-destroying pagoda with Yun Zhonghu, Bai Yunduo and Xiao waiting for an opportunity to strike. Zhuoxiaoduo's initial plan was to further deplete the combat power of the Tao ancestor. When the right Zhu Yan suddenly appeared, he would use the poison of misfortune to converge with the poison of the non-poisonous great shaman to surprise the Tao ancestor. Only then could he deplete the Tao ancestor to a greater extent. But he didn't expect that the non-poisonous shaman would die tragically before this plan could be put into action. However, his death had achieved great results. The Tao ancestor's body was already poisoned by the soul poison, a poison that dominated the world. Looking at the soul poison in the Tao ancestor's hand, Zhuoxiaoduo couldn't help but feel pity. If the Zhu Wu, who was also known for using poison, was still alive and added 100 pounds more, the effect of the poison attack should be more effective. At the right time, the 8 Zhu Wu and the Flood Witch attacked together. They surrounded the Tao ancestor as if they didn't care about their lives and launched a crazy attack. Zhuochanglu, Wu Yuding, and the Demon Royal Dong Huang also attacked. They looked for a gap and blocked all the possible gaps that the Tao ancestor could escape and didn't leave any leeway. Zhuoxiaoduo and the insufficient team retreated together. After this attack, except for Pai Yibao, who had been invisible in the void and didn't attack, the others, including Zhuoxiaoduo and Zhuoxiaonian, were basically out of strength and couldn't fight anymore. At least, this wave of attack couldn't catch up. However, for the poison Tao ancestor, the current power was enough. It was enough to restrain and even make further damage. Boom boom boom. The space exploded again. The Tao ancestor's body was shattered again and became dust in the sky. However, everyone was more vigilant and on guard. Just now, the Tao ancestor was smashed, but when he appeared again, he killed the poisonous witch as soon as he attacked. Moreover, he appeared irregularly. This time, where would he appear? Would he go to another city? Like a drop of water falling into a quiet lake. There was a small ripple that gently swayed. Swish. The moment the space stabilized again, a foot suddenly appeared behind Wanli Xiu. Wanli Xiu was fully alert and carefully on guard. The crisis perception that belonged to a warrior responded. She vaguely felt a sense of fear in her heart. Almost instinctively, She moved sideways and slashed out with her sword at the same time. However, it was still a moment too late. The Tao ancestor's foot heavily slammed on Wanli Shou's back. Although it was only 3 parts, Wanli Shou still couldn't bear it. However, at the same time that Wanli Shou was hit, Wanli Shou's sword had already fallen on that foot. With a muffled sound, the sharp sword entered 3 parts of the flesh. Blood splattered and sparks appeared. Wanli Shou screamed and was thrown dozens of meters away with her sword. She spat out mouthfuls of blood and pieces of internal organs. This kick had shattered all of Wanli Shou's internal organs. If it wasn't for Wanli Shou's godlike reaction speed, and if it wasn't for the heaven-mending stone hanging in front of her chest, this kick would have been enough to shatter Wanli Shou's bones and kill her. Shou-er! Long Yuxing was scared out of his wits. He roared and rushed forward desperately. I'm fine. Kill the enemy. Wanli Shou struggled and shouted. She rolled and instantly left the battlefield far away. Now that she was seriously injured and her combat power was less than 10%, she couldn't be too close to the battlefield. If she forced herself to stay, it would only affect her own energy, especially Long Yuxing's attention. Violent whistling sounds came again and again. The candle dragon followed in Wanli Shou's footsteps. He was sent flying and spat out mouthfuls of blood. Then, Changliang Zuwu was hit in the chest and flew out. Xiang Chong groaned and staggered back. The conqueror's halberd in his hand was broken into 17 or 18 pieces. He spat out blood as he retreated. Zhan Xuejuan's 100 battle spear stabbed the palm of the Tao ancestor who was chasing after her. However, it was as if she had stabbed a metal mountain. The strong impact made Zhan Xuejuan lose her footing and stagger back. The long spear in her hand was buzzing and trembling. A strong demonic aura lingered around the tip of the spear. At this moment, the Tao ancestor finally couldn't help but turn his head to take a look. A slight doubt flashed across his eyes. That's the god-killing spear? Zhan Xuejuan's 100 battle spear was naturally not the god-killing spear. However, it was made of mystical black gold. It could reach the level of a divine weapon, but it was still a distance away from the level of an innate spiritual treasure. Only the Tao ancestor nurtured the spear with his demonic aura. Zhan Xuejuan experienced the incident in the demonic spirit's forest. The demonic aura that grew in her body was no different from the demonic aura of the god-killing spear. After being nurtured for a long time, the 100 battle spear naturally had the aura of the god-killing spear. However, at the root it was still very different from the god-killing spear. However, the Tao ancestor was not the demon ancestor. He only came into contact with the 100 battle spear for a moment. It was difficult for him to understand more, so he made a wrong judgment. In the next moment, Gonggong Zuwu's heavenly water cover fell again. The Tao ancestor's body flashed and he was already out of the attack range. His eyes flashed and he waved the horsetail whisk in his hand. Thousands of threads flew out of the main body of the horsetail whisk. Ah! Grand Sorcerer Gomong let out a shrill scream that did not sound like a human's voice. His entire body was like a huge hedgehog, and every thread pierced through his extremely strong Grand Sorcerer body. Under this attack, even his soul was nailed to death. Countless threads went from his eyes, from his forehead, from his throat, from his dantian, and from his heart. There was no vital part of his body that didn't penetrate. They all went in and out, penetrating from front to back. Endless Taoist connotation went up along the threads, destroying the divine palace, piercing the sea of consciousness, nailing the soul and completely destroying the physical body. As the Gomong Grand Shaman roared, his entire body instantly turned into pieces of minced meat. Within a radius of 1,000 feet, there was only a patch of blood red. The Tao ancestor suddenly used a killing move to kill Zuwu and Gomong in an instant. His body, which was originally moving at lightning speed, finally stopped for a moment. At the right time, Donghuang's Donghuang Bell took advantage of the gap and crashed into the Tao ancestor, causing him to stagger. Zhuo Chonglu followed up with a sudden attack, but with a tyrannical force, it collided with the empty horsetail whisk handle. Then there was a loud explosion. Zhuo Zhonglu let out a muffled groan as he retreated. The Tao ancestor also grunted, and blood spurted out of his nostrils. The horsetail whisk, which was the core of the impact, turned into powder. After losing the enhancement of the spatial merit power, this connate spirit treasure was destroyed by everyone when it was about to kill Zhu Wu and Gomang. The follow-up attacks came one after another. First, Yu Moyan and Dugu Yen rushed out of Gomang Zhu Wu's blood rain. The two of them stabbed their swords into the Tao ancestor's chest. Our hearts will always be united, and we will fly together. The two of them had cultivated the two wings mental cultivation method for thousands of years. They had already reached the peak. At this moment, they were united and connected. The combined power of the two swords was not just 1 + 1, but 2 × 2 was greater than 4. It was 4 times the power of the two of them working together. Spiritual energy exploded, and a big hole suddenly appeared in the Tao ancestor's chest. The Tao ancestor snorted coldly. His hands struck out like lightning, and the two swords were broken. Yu Moyan and Dugu Yen screamed at the same time and flew out, blood spurting out. Even if it was 4 times the power of the two of them working together, their cultivation was not enough. If this combination of swords was used by Zhou Xiaoduo and Zhou Xiaonian, it could at least destroy one of the Tao ancestors' avatars. As for them, it was already their limit to cause serious damage. Fortunately, they were not alone. The Demon Emperor's sword flew out of his hand like a meteor and hit the wound in the Tao ancestor's chest heavily. White light flickered fiercely, and the sword bloomed with light, reflecting the mountains and rivers of the universe. Boom! The Tao ancestor finally grunted, and a big transparent hole appeared in his chest. The Demon Emperor's sword broke through the defense and penetrated directly. Then, Dijiang, Candle Dragon, Tianwu, and the rest of Zhu Wu's sorrowful and angry attacks came surging. With a roar, the Tao ancestor's avatar finally turned into powder with a sigh. It had only been a few hundred breaths of time since the start of the battle, which was less than 7 minutes in actual time. However, the changes in the battle and the tragic losses made everyone's heart beat wildly, and they shuddered. 3 of the Tao ancestors' avatars had been destroyed. However, on the Alliance's side, there was already Chan Sheng, the poisonous witch, and Gomang Zhu Wu, who had paid a huge price. Among the people who were seriously injured, Wanli Xiu's injuries were so serious that it was almost impossible for her to participate in this battle. Although the magical effect of the heaven-mending stone was still as before, with the improvement of Wanli Xiu's own strength, coupled with the serious injuries this time, she had only recovered more than half of it before it was exhausted and turned into powder. Li Chenglong's eyes flickered, and he shouted in a deep voice, "Everyone, form a circle, back to back, and face outside." Everyone came to their senses when they heard this, and they immediately took action. All the participants formed a large circle, facing outside, and protected a few injured people who had not fully recovered in the middle of the circle. Gonggong Zhu Wu, Dijiang, and Zhu Wu all felt as if their hearts were being cut by knives. The death of Zhu Wu and Gomang was a huge blow to the group of Zhu Wu. It was unpredictable. However, now was not the time to be sad. The next avatar that appeared could cause any one or several people present to accompany Gomang. The Tao ancestor's strength is weaker than I thought. Li Chenglong was on full alert, and he said quickly, "Up until now, we have already destroyed 3 of the Tao ancestors' Golden Lotus avatars. The price we paid is not very high. In this battle, the alliance of the 3 clans will definitely win." The price paid is not very high. Displeasure appeared on the faces of the grand sorcerers. Flood, Lai Hua, and the others' faces darkened. An ancestor sorcerer, a great sorcerer, and a toad saint. A total of 3 top-level masters had died. 36 people had participated in the battle. Except for the permanent loss of 3 people, more than half of them were seriously injured, or had just recovered from serious injuries. You call this not a big price to pay? It should be that the price paid by the human side is not high, right? However, when they thought about the fact that they were fighting against the Tao ancestor, even though they were unhappy with Li Chenglong's words, they had to admit that the price paid was indeed not high. After all, it was the Tao ancestor. Li Chenglong spoke quickly. "Everyone, please bear with it. At this critical moment, it is important to destroy the enemy as soon as possible. According to my guess, the reason why the Tao ancestor is weaker than we thought is not without reason. In addition to the various arrangements we set up in advance, it is more likely that the 9 great worlds have just merged not long ago, and the Tao ancestor has just woken up from a deep sleep, so his strength may not have recovered to the peak. In other words, the current situation is our greatest opportunity. Li Chenglong took a deep breath. The real time to fight for our lives has not come yet. Everyone, this battle is a life and death battle. There will definitely be casualties. It is only a matter of time before we die with the enemy. The real time to fight for their lives has not come yet. It is only a matter of time before we die with the enemy. After hearing this, everyone's hearts became heavier. Up until now, everyone present had been injured. Moreover, as long as they were injured, they were seriously injured and difficult to heal quickly. In particular, the 3 people who had died had proven the power of the Tao ancestor. However, as Li Chenglong had said, the real time to fight for their lives had not come yet. It was only a matter of time before they died with the enemy. Looking at the Tao ancestor's golden lotus incarnation, it was not difficult to imagine that there were at least 6 incarnations for the Tao ancestor to consume. It was possible that the colorful cloud under their feet was the same. Then who knew how many there were? If such a fierce battle continued, how many people would survive in the end? Thinking deeper, if the Tao ancestor really went to the end and began to fight for his life in the opposite direction, his combat strength would only be even more terrifying. The situation might take a turn for the worse and become more and more difficult to deal with. The Tao ancestor is one person in the world. Why don't you leave? Why do you have to fight to the death with us here? Xiang Chong asked an extremely idiotic question at this moment. Everyone looked at him with disdain. It was rare to see someone with such a bad brain being able to cultivate to such a level since ancient times. Indeed, with a backer, even a pig could fly when standing in the wind. Li Chenglong sighed. On account of his brother-in-law, he explained tactfully, "If you were the Tao ancestor, you wouldn't leave either." Xiang Chong asked again, "Why?" Li Chenglong rolled his eyes and did not speak. If he continued to speak, not only would he lower his status, but he would also offend everyone present. He was a dignified military counselor who controlled the overall situation, but he actually chatted with a fool and lowered the overall intelligence. This was intolerable. Xiang Bing and Zhan Xuejuan said fiercely in unison, "Shut your stupid mouth." Xiang Chong scratched his head and looked at the people around him with an innocent face. He really did not understand. That was why he asked. Zhuo Xiaonian was still kind. She pitied this big guy who was full of tofu dregs. She explained, "The Tao ancestor is the Tao ancestor after all. If he fought in such a specific environment and had to escape, where would his face be?" Xiang Chong said in surprise, "Is face more important than life? Didn't you say that the most important thing is to survive?" Zhuo Xiaonian did not answer this question. Kindness was a good thing, but unrestrained kindness was a fool. Zhan Xuejuan was speechless and shouted, "Idiot! Shut the fuck up! It was so embarrassing. You asked something that no one else asked. Are you showing off that you have a mouth? Isn't this question too obvious? Why can't you understand such a simple question? Although I don't understand, but I didn't ask. Now that you've asked this question, you've exposed the fact that you're a fool. How shameful!" Fortunately, a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared around them and helped the couple out of their predicament. Earth, fire, water, and wind surged in front of them, left and right, above and below them, and it was not an illusion. Those who had special abilities were better off, but those who did not felt extremely uncomfortable. They could only use their vital essence to resist and barely hold on. Everyone knew that as long as they left the circle and showed a flaw, they would be killed in one blow. There was no luck. Zhuo Xiaoduo saw that the situation had taken a turn for the worse. He shouted and activated the power of fire again. Elemental fire art, Zhu Rong's true fire was fully activated, and Zhuo Xiaonian's extreme cold power was also dispersed at the same time. Once again, water and fire came from the same source. In an instant, another circle was formed outside their circle, blocking all the earth, fire, water, and wind from the outside world. With a clear laugh, the Tao ancestor's figure appeared again. He said lightly, "It's a good response. You're worthy of being the son of fate. Specific space, specific conditions." The Tao ancestor let out a long sigh. "And the current random creation is really exquisite to a considerable extent. If we fight blindly in such an environment, I will indeed be at a disadvantage." Demon Emperor Jun said lightly, "This is also a solution within a solution. The Tao ancestor is one person with great magical powers. Everything in the world can be used by you. If we fight outside, you don't even have to make a move. You can kill all of us with just a thought. Even if it's a bad plan, it's still a countermeasure. Fortunately, it's proven that this countermeasure can deal with and even kill the Tao ancestor." The Demon Emperor's words were extremely honest. Everyone smiled bitterly. Indeed, if they fought with the Tao ancestor outside, except for Zuoshaoduo and Zuoshaonian, the others couldn't even absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to replenish themselves. They could only exhaust their own resources. The Tao ancestor didn't even need to move his hands. He only needed to continuously summon the heavenly thunder of purple heaven to annihilate everyone. No matter where they went, they couldn't escape. Fighting outside and fighting inside were completely different. They couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. The results of the previous battle also proved that this method could deal with the Tao ancestor, and even kill him. The Tao ancestor didn't feel offended at all. He said amiably, "Fellow Taoist, your words show that you're honest." Demon Emperor Dijun said respectfully, "Indeed, the Tao ancestor's magical powers are so powerful. How can I lie?" The Tao ancestor addressed Dijun as fellow Taoist, which meant that he wanted to draw a line between them. He defined their positions as one of life and death. Demon Emperor Dijun was the same. However, even if it was a life and death battle, he still didn't lose his respect for the Tao ancestor. After all, the source of the Tao ancestor's power in this world all came from this person. He could be said to be the master of cultivators, the master of all living beings. Facing such a master, there was naturally a sense of respect from the bottom of his heart. It had nothing to do with victory or defeat, and it also had nothing to do with one's position. Since ancient times, there was a saying, "Those who don't submit to the strong are guilty." This was the truth of the entire world. Therefore, any cultivator who had some achievements and a little power wouldn't be like ordinary people, casually mentioning the name of a superior expert as a joke. It was like some words that ordinary people sometimes dared to say, such as "so-and-so expert is nothing." Such words, such as "so-and-so general is a pure idiot," would never appear in the mouth of an expert. Even if it was a daily conversation, it was all the same. What did so-and-so do in the past? How did it happen? And so on. Such words wouldn't be casually and unscrupulously commented on. Because these legendary senior experts, other than being your seniors, were more likely to be your ancestors. How could you comment on and insult them so easily? Another layer was, no matter how they were, whether they were alive or dead, they had the achievement of being recorded in history, which meant that they had the ability to become a legend. No matter what, they were thousands of times, even millions of times stronger than you. Why did it become your turn to comment? Who do you think you are? You only read a few books, a bottle of ink, and half a bottle of vinegar. You only read some so-called historical information that was unknown whether it was true or false, and you dare to comment on your seniors and predecessors. That's not being knowledgeable and knowledgeable, but being ignorant and having a cheap mouth. At the end of the day, those who had achieved something were definitely worthy of respect. Therefore, those who didn't submit to the strong were guilty. The Tao ancestor smiled faintly. With his hands behind his back, he said, "Kill!" A shadow appeared and struck out with a spear that was as swift as lightning. It pierced straight into Grand Wizard Ru Shou's body and penetrated his heart. The tyrannical demonic aura spread out rapidly at this moment. Rushizu Wu roared and instantly gathered all his strength. With his tyrannical body and cultivation, he locked onto the sneak attack spear that was embedded in his body. Then, he forcefully twisted his body and struck out with a sword and a palm. This was the final strike that he gathered with all his soul and cultivation. Although the final strike had been made, it was mostly an instinctive counterattack of a top-notch cultivator. At this moment, his eyes were filled with confusion, despair, and disbelief. He muttered softly, full of shock, "Demon Ancestor, Luo Ho." Demon Ancestor Luo Ho's attack succeeded. Although the god-slaying spear was locked onto, he had already retreated without hesitation. Rushu's sword and palm did not cause any damage to him at all. He only replied indifferently, "That's right." Rushu Zuwu laughed bitterly and muttered, "I didn't expect to die in your hands. Although it's not a disgrace to me, it's a pity that I lost my life in the battle of encircling and annihilating the Tao Ancestor." Before he could finish his words, he suddenly spat out a breath. His body suddenly showed signs of being torn apart. The extreme explosive power of the god-slaying spear burst out from his body. With a buzzing sound, it turned into a long dragon of black smoke. It rushed into the air and circled around wantonly. It was extremely joyous. This unexpected turn of events was beyond the expectations of the allied forces of the three clans. The demon clan's Luo Ho had suddenly shown up in this place. Moreover, as soon as he showed up, he ambushed and killed Ancestor Shaman Rusho, one of the 8 great Ancestor Shamans. Even Di Jiang and Gonggong Zuwu, who were close at hand, had a look of disbelief on their faces. It was greater than grief. Since when did Demon Ancestor Luo Ho join forces with the Tao Ancestor? Such a thing actually happened. It was really too unexpected. Extremely unexpected. Then, an earth-shaking roar sounded. Rushu! It was the roar of Candle Dragon Zuwu. Among the few Zuwu, he was the closest to Rushu. Seeing Rushu die, he was heartbroken and hated that he did not want to live. The other Zuwu were also inexplicably gloomy. They had been brothers for so many years. Today, 2 of them were gone in just a few minutes. Such extreme grief was really indescribable. Compared to the sorrowful and gloomy mood of the group of ancestral sorcerers, the faces of Zhuanglu, Demon Emperor Donghuang, and the others had become extremely ugly. The situation of the battle took a turn for the worse, and it suddenly became extremely bad. The Tao Ancestor used his clone to die, and he was still full of energy and combat power. He was not inferior to Chu Chu at all. The Demon Ancestor was a fresh force. Not only was he full of energy, but he also had the power to kill Zuwu with a single spear. Ordinary forces could not compete with him. Out of the 36 top-level forces on their side who participated in this battle, 4 of them had died one after another. In this battle, the situation suddenly changed from a slight advantage to an extremely bad one. Xiaoduo gritted his teeth and said, "You guys continue to fight with the Tao Ancestor. I'll deal with the Demon Ancestor. Let's end this monster as soon as possible." Then he leaped out and went straight for Demon Ancestor Luo Ho. The sharpness of the 9-9 cat hammer was even stronger. He smiled faintly and said, "Today, I finally have a chance to fight with a top-level expert. What an honor." Demon Ancestor Luo Ho's eyes did not look at him. Instead, he focused on the 100 battle spear in Zhan Xuejuan's hand and said indifferently, "Who is this girl?" Zhan Xuejuan rolled her eyes and said coldly, "What does it have to do with you?" Demon Ancestor Luo Ho stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. The god-slaying spear that was flying back in the sky buzzed and fell back into his hand. The 100 battle spear in Zhan Xuejuan's hand actually vibrated. Strands of pure demonic aura flashed from the tip of the 100 battle spear and shook the void. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho's eyes flashed with a trace of gratification and said indifferently, "Too faint." Then, he turned to look at Xiaoduo and said, "Sword Emperor's reputation is illustrious. Of course, I've heard of you for a long time." Sword Emperor. Since Xiaoduo's group of dragons in Shangjing fought for this name, people had already called him that. And the main culprit and initiator of this matter was naturally the generation's military advisor, Li Chenglong. After Li Chenglong created this name, he was beaten up thousands of times by Xiaoduo. Since then, this name was rarely called by others, especially not by all the members of the team. these 3 words were even more taboo. But, since he had this name and had once said it in front of others, it naturally spread. At first, it was only spread by a few people. Later, it spread to the Hidden Dragon High Martial Artists. All the Hidden Dragon High Martial Artists discussed and verified it together, and they were shocked. Fuck. This name could be said to be the most suitable name for Zuoshaoduo. Firstly, Zuoshaoduo was famous for his sword in most of the occasions. He was far more worthy of the name Iron Fist Prince. Being called Sword Emperor was not wrong at all. Besides, there was another more important reason. Since ancient times, Zuoshaoduo's special characteristic in one aspect was recognized as unprecedented and unparalleled. In this field, Zuoshaoduo could be said to be at the level of absolute domination, the position of the Starry Sky Monarch. Not only was no one able to shake him, but even those who came later might not be able to catch up. In this way, in the Hidden Dragon High Martial Artists, many teachers and students intentionally or unintentionally spread this rumor. By the time Zuoshaoduo found out about this in the army, it was already too late to stop it. For this reason, Zuoshaoduo caught Li Chenglong and almost beat him up into a pulp. Furthermore, he would inhumanely torture everyone in the brigade. But what was done could not be undone. The name of Sword Emperor had already shocked the world, and he was a household name. At this moment, when he heard Demon Ancestor's words, Zuoshaoduo's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Demon Ancestor, you can call me Hammer Monarch. I don't mind. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho said lightly. So a nickname can be changed? If it can be changed, I would like to change my name. Change to what? Zuoshaoduo asked curiously. Change to. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho smiled coldly. Boy, are you stalling for time? The battle had already begun. Everyone was surrounding Dao Ancestor and attacking him fiercely. There were people who were constantly injured, and people who were constantly beaten out of the battle circle. From time to time, they would vomit blood. Then, they would heal their injuries, enter the battle again, and be injured again. On the other hand, Zuoshaoduo and Demon Ancestor Luo Ho sighed. It was calm. Zuoshaoduo narrowed his eyes and said, How can I be a match for Demon Ancestor alone? Naturally, I will stall for time and every moment counts. If I can stall for time, everyone will come to besiege Demon Ancestor, and my danger will be much lower. Demon Ancestor, you even know my name, Zuoshaoduo. How can you not know that I, Zuoshaoduo, am as timid as a mouse and most afraid of death? Demon Ancestor Luo Ho smiled faintly. Timid as a mouse and afraid of death. How can I not see that? Zuoshaoduo said humbly, Demon Ancestor, you must have overestimated me. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho said, I never underestimate my opponents, and I will not allow you to stall for time. Zuoshaoduo said, But I still want to stall for time as long as possible. If I can continue chatting like this, that would be best. I am a person who likes to chat the most. I especially like to listen to seniors and experts talk about the past and present. If I can talk, why should I fight? I wonder if Demon Ancestor is willing to teach me. Demon Ancestor was instantly annoyed. He really did not expect this boy to be so shameless with his cultivation. He was willing to become a chatterbox and act weak. At that moment, he stopped chatting and shook his hand. The god-slaying spear suddenly flashed with a cold light and buzzed. A sharp, murderous aura was about to come out of his body. Zuoshaoduo hurriedly raised the 9-9 kitty hammer and tried to persuade him. We are all high-level cultivators. Why do we have to fight? Can't we just talk again? What answered him was the sharp sound of the god-slaying spear. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho thrust his spear and did not say anything else. He used his actions to answer Zuoshaoduo's shameless request. But in the next moment, there was a buzzing sound and a crack appeared in the space. It was the 9-9 kitty hammer that broke through the void and came with great power. The two sides collided and there was a muffled sound. The god-slaying spear trembled and flew into the sky. There was a sharp sound. If the god-slaying spear could speak, it would definitely have cursed out loud. Despicable! Shameless! This was because he did not know when this boy had completed the operation of the Thousand Souls Nightmare Hammer. The moment the twin hammers attacked, The first move was already stacked with the power of more than 10 moves. No matter how spiritual the god-slaying spear was, it was still a spear. Compared to Zhuo Xiaoduo's brain, it was definitely much worse. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho's lips twitched for a while. Fortunately, he had decided to attack and did not say anything else. If he had allowed Su Ke to continue accumulating his power, he might have been seriously injured. That would be like flipping an aircraft carrier in a ditch. He would be so embarrassed. Also, the moment he came into contact with Su Ke, he recalled the power of this boy's attack. It was not inferior to his at all. Su Ke's words made Demon Ancestor Luo Ho's heart tremble. He immediately put away the arrogance in his heart and treated the young man in front of him as an opponent of the same level. Then there was an unusually intense battle. Hundreds of moves were exchanged in the blink of an eye. Both sides moved quickly, and their attack and defense speed were extremely fast. However, Demon Ancestor Luo Ho also discovered something unusual in this round of battle. That was, Zhuo Xiaoduo was controlling the direction of the battle, gradually moving away from the battle circle of the Tao ancestors on the other side. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho did not care about this and simply followed Su Ke's plan. After another 100 moves, Zhuo Xiaoduo had already arrived at a relatively safe distance from the besieging battle. However, he heard Zhuo Xiaoduo's loud shout, and for the first time, he attacked with all his strength. Demon Ancestor Luo Ho was not surprised by this. He also gathered his energy and launched an attack, not giving in at all. The battle between Zhuo Xiaoduo and Demon Ancestor Luo Ho was enough to be recorded in the history of battles in the starry sky. Because the battle situation was so strange that it could be said to be unprecedented. Zhuo Xiaoduo had maintained 120% of his offensive power from beginning to end. He did not have any defensive moves at all. If that was all, it would not be surprising. It was extremely common to rely on the strong to bully the weak and use all the offensive power. What was strange was that Demon Ancestor Luo Ho also used 120% of his offensive power. He did not show any weakness and counterattacked with all his might. Both sides were attacking crazily, without a single defensive move. Chapter 1431. His fighting style caused the surrounding space to collapse and shatter, to the point where it failed to repair itself. The more Fiend Ancestor Rahu fought, the more he felt that the kid in front of him was his strongest opponent apart from the Tao Ancestor. Despite being a junior that had lived for 100 years, he had rich combat experience. Yet, he was not inferior to him in any way. It was truly rare. Good kid. Good fiend. Boom, 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 boom. The two had fought for less than 100 seconds, but they had already exchanged more than 1,000 moves. Both of them had gone back and forth on the bridge of life and death several times. Both of them felt exhilarated as their fighting spirit soared. Not bad. Fiend Ancestor Rahu praised. There's something even better. The Thousand Souls Nightmare Hammer stirred up a storm once again. As for Zhuo Xiaoduo, specks of light began to appear in his hand as they flew around randomly in space. Fiend Ancestor Rahu was perplexed as he focused on dealing with the attacks. The specks of light that had suddenly appeared were constantly attacking him, harassing and sneaking up on him. Those specks of light were actually hidden weapons? You actually used hidden weapons to help you deal with me? After confirming this point, Fiend Ancestor did not know whether to laugh or cry. Using hidden weapons to participate in a battle of this level was already rare. Furthermore, the hidden weapons used for petty tricks were all made of abnormally weak ordinary jade. There were many shapes, such as gourds, lotus seeds, etc. There was everything one could think of. However, for such a material, even if it was infused with Zhuo Xiaoduo's spiritual energy, it would not cause any harm to the Fiend Ancestor. In the beginning, Fiend Ancestor Rahu was still cautious, afraid that he would be ambushed by Zhuo Xiaoduo. However, he did not care about it later on. He allowed the hidden weapons to strike him, but they were shattered by his body. Once, twice, thrice, 5 times, 10 times, 100 times, it was the same. This only proved that the hidden weapons were of such quality. They could only harass the enemy, but how could they harm the enemy? Was this brat crazy? Fiend ancestor Rahu remained vigilant. He still suspected that there might be some trick hidden in this. However, as the battle continued, tens of thousands of hidden weapons shattered on his body, but it did not hurt at all. Rahu was finally annoyed. What's the point of using such petty tricks in a battle of our level? Wasn't he afraid of being distracted? Or are you looking down on me? Therefore, he attacked with all his might, suppressing Zwishaodua's attacks like a huge mountain. The god-slaying spear became more and more elusive, advancing and retreating like a god. For a moment, he actually managed to suppress 40% of Zwishaodua's 120% attack. He was at a disadvantage. However, Zwishaodua's hidden weapons were still flying over like a storm. It was as if he was going all out against the demon ancestor. Fiend ancestor Rahu felt even more vexed. He ignored it and did not dodge. All he cared about was pressing down. Suddenly, puff. Fiend ancestor Rahu sensed danger approaching him. His body instinctively spun, and his head tilted to the side as though it had been fractured. It was far beyond the limits of a human's head. However, what followed was a sharp pain in his lower abdomen, right thigh and left calf. There was actually a hidden weapon that was like a red-hot needle. Its sharpness broke through his demonic chi defense, burrowed into his flesh, and embedded itself in his bones. Fiend ancestor Rahu was extremely shocked. He flew back, feeling that the injuries in the 3 places where he had been hit were not light. What is this thing? Fiend ancestor Rahu roared in disbelief. Zwishaodua roared, and the twin hammers in his hands once again turned into stormy waves. His attacks resumed, and he increased the intensity of his attacks from the beginning to the end. It was an extremely violent attack that did not care about his life or the cost. He was going all out. He could not give Fiend ancestor Rahu any chance to treat his wounds. This was an extremely rare opportunity. How could he let it go so easily? Puff, puff. Fiend ancestor Rahu continued to circulate his energy as he dealt with Zwishaodua's attacks. His demonic chi erupted like never before. Following the explosion of the devil chi, the 3 tiny lights were forced out of his body. They were still shining, and it was a ghastly sight. Hexagonal hidden weapon. Fiend ancestor Rahu snorted coldly. So it's a special hidden weapon made from the starry sky indestructible stone. It's no wonder it can break through my demonic body. However, even the starry sky indestructible stone is insufficient to deal with me. Demonic chi lingered around him as he fought and healed his wounds at the same time. The wounds on his skin and flesh were rapidly healing. The starry sky indestructible stone, which had always been successful, had the special effect of preventing experts from healing. However, it was useless against the fiend ancestor. The hidden weapons continued to fly around as more starry sky indestructible stones were unleashed. However, the fiend ancestor, who had suffered once, was already on his guard. How could he fall for it a second time? It was unknown what Zwishaodua was thinking. Despite knowing that it was unlikely to be effective, he continued to unleash his attacks without any signs of relaxing. Fiend ancestor Rahu no longer said that his opponent was using petty tricks. This was because he no longer dared to underestimate such petty tricks. Regardless, the 3 starry sky indestructible stones had an effect on the fiend ancestor. It also allowed Zwishaodua to gradually gain the upper hand in the following battle and suppress the fiend ancestor. The spiritual energy in Zwishaodua's body surged like a tsunami. It was endless and unceasing. Fiend ancestor Rahu did not dare to show weakness as he crazily counterattacked. In Zwishaodua's heart, his understanding of the profundities of martial arts and the great Tao was constantly rising, constantly advancing, constantly breaking through. Facing such a perfect opponent who had reached the pinnacle and was evenly matched in a one-on-one battle caused Zwishaodua's blood to boil. Every cell in his body was cheering and shouting. Fiend ancestor Rahu was like an extreme catalyst. He gathered all the messy things that Zwishaodua had learned in his life together and tempered them to the extreme with a heavy hammer. Yet, even though Fiend ancestor Rahu was doing his best to counterattack, he was still wary of Zwishaodua's hidden weapon attack. His distraction prevented him from interrupting Zhuxiaoduo's enlightenment. Despite knowing that his opponent was using him to gain enlightenment, Fiend Ancestor Rahu could only watch passively. However, he had a calm temperament. He would definitely not lose his composure because of this. Furthermore, Zhuxiaoduo's crazed attacks were extremely beneficial to Fiend Ancestor Rahu. Another 200 breaths passed and 2,700 moves were over. The 9x9 cat hammer once again transformed into a heaven-shaking hurricane. It came crashing down with even greater force. The god-slaying spear screeched as it was blocked by the Fiend Ancestor's hand. The hammer smashed down on the god-slaying spear. Sparks lit up the night sky like lightning. Such a situation had happened many times before. Fiend Ancestor Rahu knew very well that his opponent's next step was to bounce back, followed by another hammer strike. He was already too familiar with this rhythm and routine. But at that moment, the hammer that had paused for less than a 10,000th of a second suddenly produced a strange sound. 2 streaks of cold light flew towards him at lightning speed. The 2 cold beams were accompanied by an extremely sharp wind-tearing sound as they stabbed straight into Fiend Ancestor Rahu's eyes. The sudden turn of events left the Fiend Ancestor alarmed. However, it was already too late for him to dodge. The sneak attack was just too close and too sudden. All he could do was close his eyes and turn his eyelids into his final obstacle. He rapidly injected copious amounts of fiendish aura to barely block the attack. However, this was a killer move that Zhuxiaoduo had been planning for a long time. Furthermore, it was so close that the Fiend Ancestor was unable to react in time. The 2 sharp awls penetrated Fiend Ancestor Rahu's eyelids and into his eyeballs. They were 5 inches deep. Roar! Fiend Ancestor Rahu let out a tragic cry as he desperately retreated. Black blood spewed out from his eyes. The pain he felt at that moment had reached its limits. Ever since Fiend Ancestor Rahu was born, he had never experienced such pain in his long life. Instantly, even his soul seemed to convulse. And at that moment, Zhuxiaoduo's offensive had doubled in strength. The 9x9 cat hammer was like purple firmament divine lightning as it smashed down on the blind and imbalanced Fiend Ancestor Rahu's body 3,000 times in a continuous stream. The Fiend Ancestor was instantly reduced to scattered fiendish aura by Zhuxiaoduo. Not even a fingernail-sized bone fragment was left behind. The surrounding space tens of thousands of feet collapsed inwardly. Endless cracks gradually filled one's eyes. The god-slaying spear wailed as it charged into the sky. It circled in midair as it constantly emitted fiendish aura that turned richer and richer. A whirlwind rose as countless fiendish aura rapidly gathered. Zhuxiaoduo brandished his sledgehammer as he smashed down again and again. Clearly, he was trying to prevent the fiendish aura from gathering. However, the fiendish aura transformed into countless tiny whirlwinds that spun in the surroundings, each doing their own thing. As such, Zhuxiaoduo could only focus on the east and not the west. It was a futile effort. Finally, a figure slowly took form in the blob of fiendish aura. As the fiendish aura whooshed, the dissipated boundless fiendish aura was completely absorbed by the figure. As the fiendish aura dissipated, a tall figure appeared with the god-slaying spear in hand. A pair of extremely solemn eyes looked at Zhuxiaoduo's face as he enunciated each word clearly. Sword Emperor. What a good move! Fiend Ancestor Rahu did not feel that Zhuxiaoduo's moves were despicable, shameless, or despicable. As an expert of the older generation, he understood the rules of combat better than anyone else. How could there be anything despicable or shameless in a battle? Any move should be used. Using all means was the right way to go. Hence, Zhuxiaoduo's moves were completely normal and even appropriate. They made the best use of everything and were extremely exciting. For an expert of the older generation like Rahu, they all agreed on one thing. Those who scolded their enemies as despicable and shameless were those who had lost the battle and were incapable. The strong would never look for excuses. There was no doubt about this. Hence, Fiend Ancestor Rahu only felt amazed by Zhuxiaoduo's moves, because he also had these things. He was even richer than Zhuxiaoduo. However, he could not match up to Zhuxiaoduo's level. He dared to play this move in front of an opponent who was on par with him, or even stronger than him. Just this courage alone was amazing. This was talent. Or could it be inherited? Hence, Fiend Ancestor's other feeling was that Minister Vigilant was indeed not an ordinary person. He had fought with him twice. The first time he was defeated. The second time he gathered his strength and was already able to fight against him. Like father, like son. Father and son were two heroes, but the son was better than the father. There was still no superfluous words. Both sides once again engaged in a chaotic battle. After fighting for the second time, Fiend Ancestor, who felt that he did not lose much energy, suddenly realized that Zhuoxiaoduo's combat power seemed to have suddenly increased by several times. His every move was overflowing with a natural self-confidence. This feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Self-confidence. This was the best reflection of one's own strength. Fiend Ancestor also knew what caused Zhuoxiaoduo to change. It was the battle with him today. With the strength of one person, not only did he fight to a draw with Fiend Ancestor, he even blew him up. This result brought Zhuoxiaoduo's self-confidence to the point of exploding and even turning the sky upside down. It was also from this moment onwards that Zhuoxiaoduo's mentality reached an unprecedented level of perfection. From now on, I am really an invincible expert. I can stand shoulder to shoulder with Dao Ancestor and Fiend Ancestor, and even surpass them. This kind of self-confidence was not only effective in increasing one's own combat power, but it was also effective in increasing one's own strength. There was a saying that was the best. Audacious. Cough. In addition, Zhuoxiaoduo's control of the power of light and heavy had also advanced from great success to perfection. Whether it was lifting light as if it was heavy or lifting heavy as if it was light, light was not light, heavy was not heavy. Everything was under his control. He could truly do as he pleased, and his thoughts were divine. This hammer seemed as heavy as 1,000 mountains falling, but in fact, it was as straight as a willow leaf fluttering in the wind. In an instant, it could still press down on 10,000 peaks, could switch between light and heavy at will. In such a high-intensity, extreme battle, it was impossible for the Demon Alpha to casually switch between huge amounts of power. This was something that not even the Demon Alpha could do. This also caused Fiend Ancestor Rahu to find it more and more difficult as he fought. He gradually found it difficult to cope. Suddenly, Zhuoxiaoduo's gaze sharpened as a ferocious glint flashed in his eyes. He gathered unprecedented violence, and his attacks became even more violent. Fiend Ancestor Rahu did not dare hesitate. With a roar, the speed of his spear attacks increased, and his body turned into nothingness. All that was left was the god-slaying spear. It was like a dragon, rising up and down amidst the copious demonic aura. Suddenly, a black beam shot into the sky. Following Fiend Ancestor's roar, the 10,000 spear shadows of the god-slaying spear converged and condensed into something corporeal. It seemed to transcend time and space as it stabbed out. It was a fatal spear strike. This spear strike was a fatal spear strike. With the 10,000 spear shadows that seemed corporeal and illusory, everything was sealed. There was no heaven on earth, time and space. Then, the 10,000 spears merged into one, using the most extreme and corporeal spear strike to kill the enemy. This spear strike could be said to be the culmination of Fiend Ancestor Rahu's lifetime of cultivation. It was also the most spectacular work of his spear Dao attainments. The moment the spear rose, it had already sealed off all of Zhuoxiaoduo's dodging space. There was no way to dodge. There was no way to dodge. The only way was to be hit by the spear. What was even more deadly was that Zhuoxiaoduo was attacking with his twin hammers at this moment, leaving his chest wide open. The timing of this spear could be said to be like a white steed flashing through a crack. Taking advantage of this opening to enter, how could it not hit? Die! Fiend Ancestor Rahu roared. But the next moment, something strange happened. The god-slaying spear that was about to pierce Zhuoxiaoduo's heart disappeared into thin air. It was as if it had suddenly evaporated from the void, vanishing without a trace. The Void Extermination Pagoda. Fiend Ancestor Rahu was startled. He finally could not help but curse angrily. Damn it! What a good move! He had actually been tricked once again. The opening that Zuo revealed seemed to be out of habit. Right before he executed his ultimate move, his aura burst forth and he pointed his upper hammer finger to the heavens and lower hammer finger to the earth. Intentionally or unintentionally, he revealed an opening in his abdomen. It disappeared in a flash, but it really existed. Of course, against an ordinary opponent, this oversight was nothing, much less a flaw. However, how could Fiend Ancestor Rahu be compared to an ordinary opponent? Although the two of them had not exchanged blows for long, they had a good grasp of each other's ultimate moves and various tricks. Even if they did not know all of them by heart, it could be said that they had grasped most of them. Fiend Ancestor Rahu had already paid attention to this oversight many times. He was confident that he could grasp this opportunity. And as long as he grasped this opportunity, he could kill this brat who dared to jump around in front of him in one strike. This oversight was fleeting to others. Even if they saw it, they would not be able to grasp it. But to Fiend Ancestor, it was an opportunity to kill a strong enemy. And the key to this was speed. The speed of his attack. Only by attaining godlike speed, combined with the super destructive power of the god-slaying spear, could he achieve his ultimate goal. This was also when Fiend Ancestor confirmed that the timing was right. The moment this flaw was revealed, he struck, but he never expected that this was actually a trap set up by this treacherous brat. This was a trap that should not have existed. Other people did not have spatial artifacts like the Void Extermination Pagoda. Other treasures, even connate spirit treasures that specialized in storing things, might not be able to withstand the ultimate attack of his god-slaying spear. But the Void Extermination Pagoda was different. It was a world. The ultimate spear's power was extraordinary, enough to destroy heaven and earth. But to a world, it was still child's play. In this way, Zuo had purposely created this oversight. His real goal was to take away the god-slaying spear. It was really deliberate and a deep scheme. One must know that, in a normal battle, the god-slaying spear was in his hands most of the time. The spear basically never left his hands. Even if it left his hands occasionally, it was because his spirit was closely connected. Just like just now, when his body was destroyed, his spirit was still connected to the god-slaying spear. That was why he could quickly duplicate his body. Or perhaps, it was because of his instantaneous demonic body that Zuo focused more attention on the god-slaying spear. In order to destroy Fiend Ancestor, he had to first separate the connection between Fiend Ancestor and the god-slaying spear. Only when Fiend Ancestor unleashed his full power and the god-slaying spear left his hands would it be Fiend Ancestor's strongest killing move, a sure kill move. At the same time, it also meant that in this move, the god-slaying spear would lose its autonomy. The spear would be enslaved. Zuo had planned for this moment. He really did not resist, but instead opened the Void Extermination Pagoda and let the god-slaying spear rush into the Void Extermination Pagoda. Then, Zuo closed the Void Extermination Pagoda immediately. He had already sealed the god-slaying spear inside, thus separating the connection between Fiend Ancestor and the god-slaying spear. This move could be said to be a stroke of genius, a godly turn of events. But Fiend Ancestor Rahu was almost driven mad by him. How could the weapon that had followed him for countless years suddenly disappear? What the fuck? Zuo, do you think that a small world without you personally overseeing it can trap the god-slaying spear? Fiend Ancestor Rahu sneered. That's hard to say. I still have a way with numinous treasures, Zuo said with a smile. That smile was exceptionally punchable. Hehe. Then I'll let you know what kind of power the god-slaying spear, which is known as the #1 numinous treasure in terms of attack, has. Even if it's a small world, it will collapse because of it. Fiend Ancestor Rahu did not waste any more words. He activated his divine sense and summoned the god-slaying spear. At the same time, he wanted to give the god-slaying pagoda a fierce blow. Even if he could not destroy it, he wanted to cause great damage. But then, he was dumbfounded. He could clearly still sense it, but he could not summon it no matter what. It was as if he could not find a way out. What the fuck? Inside the Void Extermination Pagoda, the god-slaying spear was like a meteor chasing after the moon, flying left and right. Its movement speed was about to exceed the speed of light. It had full confidence that no matter what kind of numinous treasure it was, it would not be able to trap it. Could easily charge in from one end and then directly pass through from the other side. But what the god-slaying spear did not expect was that it had barged into a world. Or perhaps a universe. This was simply fucking dog's hit. Why was it so big inside? And it seemed to be changing randomly. It was vast and boundless. Although it could travel millions of miles in an instant, when the divine sense looked around, it was still in the vast void that the god-slaying spear's sharpness gradually diminished. It no longer wanted to get rid of this strange space. It was fine as long as it could get out. But how could it get out? Just as the god-slaying spear was at a loss, suddenly, the demonic aura on the other side rose and rolled. It was Smoke Shirsi. Another god-slaying spear was shooting from the other side. It was the exact same god-slaying spear. The god-slaying spear, which had sensed something with its divine sense, was stunned. What the fuck? Was it looking at a mirror? The two god-slaying spears naturally collided, and a fierce battle ensued. Obviously, Smoke Shirsi was no match for the authentic god-slaying spear. He was at a disadvantage as soon as they started to fight. This was also reasonable. After all, Smoke Shirsi was a pirated version. At most, it was a fake. On the other hand, the god-slaying spear was the authentic Vita skin. The difference between them was obvious. It was very, very big. After a few rounds of fighting, Smoke Shirsi was beaten until he wailed and was covered in wounds. The god-slaying spear, which had the upper hand, was unprecedentedly furious. What the fuck? There was actually a pirated version. Other things aside, it would definitely protect its rights. What it didn't expect was that Yen Shirsi didn't care about the injuries on his body at all. These injuries were nothing to him. Back then, he had been beaten up dozens of times. But because of that, he had friends who could help him in battle. Help! Smoke Shirsi shouted at the top of his lungs. Instantly, swoosh, 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 swoosh. 8 gourds appeared in front of the god-slaying spear. In an instant, they surrounded the god-slaying spear, forming an 8-sided encirclement. Don't move. Put your hands up. Surrender and we'll spare your life. You've been surrounded. Surrender. I'll kill you if you don't. Let Shirsi swallow you. To think that you would have such a day. The god-slaying spear was stunned. Fuck. Why am I surrounded? Upon closer inspection, most of them were old acquaintances and old rivals, apart from the black and white gourds. There were red, green, purple, yellow, and green gourds. Fuck. Is this a gourd meeting? Am I in a gourd's nest? Seeing the other party shaking their heads and wagging their tails arrogantly, the god-slaying spear was secretly fearful. The gourds in front of him were all top-notch primordial spiritual treasures. Although they were no match for him individually, any 2 of them would be able to fight him to a draw. If 3 of them ganged up on him, he might be able to deal with them with his lightning speed. At the very least, he might be able to escape unscathed. But if there were more of them, whether he could escape was another matter. This was the experience he had gained after so many years of dealing with them. The biggest problem now was that he was not facing 1, 2, or 3 of them, but 8 of them. All of them were staring at him fiercely. What was the meaning of that liquid at the corner of their mouths? Since when did connate spiritual treasures start ganging up on each other? Where was their shame? The black gas surrounding the body of the god-slaying spear gradually dissipated. Then, from the body of the spear, the shadow of a youth dressed in black clothes appeared. His face was thin and his gaze was sharp. However, his entire appearance was dejected. You want to win by numbers? Do you have any shame? Where is your dignity as a connate spiritual treasure? The god-slaying spear muttered angrily. Hearing this, the other gourds were embarrassed. That's right, we have our dignity too. Why do we need to talk about the rules of the martial world when dealing with evil people like you? We are fighting together to get rid of evil and protect the good. We are enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. You have been going against the flow for so many years. All the people with lofty ideals have the right to punish you. Only little Jo was full of righteousness. She spoke with a stern expression and spoke with conviction. Her words were sonorous, and she looked like a hero from the pugilistic world. That's right. We are upholding justice on behalf of the heavens. The other gourds found a reason and spoke in unison. They all felt that the matter of ganging up on the god-slaying spear, which was a little embarrassing, had become a big deal. We represent justice. Since it is justice, ganging up on him is justice too. The god-slaying spear looked even more defeated. He muttered, "Shameless, extremely shameless. You can even come up with such a crazy reason. Is it true that things take after their masters? The Sword Emperor's spiritual treasure is really imitating him." Fine, fine. Then, the 8 gourds escorted the god-slaying spear back to the ground of the Tower of Annihilation. They were all arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Bai and Jo disappeared in a flash. They went back into the cat hammer to fight again. They came because they were afraid that the other 6 brothers would be too embarrassed to join hands to deal with the god-slaying spear. In fact, it was their arrival that took care of the god-slaying spear without any bloodshed. The god-slaying spear knew that he could not win and did not want to embarrass himself. He stood straight on the ground, but a pair of cold eyes appeared. He stared at the impostor Yen 14. He was not only an impostor, he was also a shameless traitor. His eyes were sharp, merciless, cold. In the beginning, Yen 14 still looked at him bravely. Slowly, he felt guilty. Even the body of the spear bent a lot. He lowered his head and slipped to the side, disappearing. People could be shameless. Spears were born straight. They had a higher limit of shamelessness. Humph! The god-slaying spear snorted. Outside, the demon ancestor, who had lost the god-slaying spear, was in an unprecedented sorry state. He was at a complete disadvantage just by using his own cultivation. Zhuo waved his twin hammers, pointing to the east and hitting the west. He was in high spirits. Finally, with a boom, the demon ancestor Luo Ho was blasted into a big ball of demonic energy. However, this demon did not repair the demonic energy and disappeared without a trace. Currently, the demons of the demon race were still around. The demon ancestor was an indestructible body and could not be completely destroyed. However, if this continued, his demon source would inevitably be exhausted. The demon ancestor knew that he was no match for him, so he made a prompt decision to retreat. With 2 hammers in his hands, Duo charged into the encirclement of the Dao ancestor with an invincible and disdainful look. As soon as he entered the battle, he attacked with 3,600 hammers. Unbridled, boundless arrogance. Roar. The hammer's in Duo's hands rolled up and down, smashing the space into pieces. Great Flood Shaman was originally working together to attack, and he was the main force. However, he was not sent flying by Dao Ancestor, and was actually forced out by Duo's violent aura. He could not help but have a gloomy expression. However, with the arrival of Duo, the pressure on everyone was greatly reduced. Many people who were barely holding on took the opportunity to heal their injuries and take medicine. The battle had not been long, but everyone was physically and mentally exhausted. They could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Boom, 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 boom. With continuous explosions, the Dao ancestor's fists continuously bombarded the 9-9 cat hammer. The impact caused the universe to shake and the space to shatter. Duo's hammers were hit away again and again. The unusually strong recoil made Duo feel very uncomfortable. However, he gritted his teeth and persevered. He did not relax with every blow and every hammer. After 3,600 hammers, another 7,200 hammers were smashed out even more fiercely. He attacked without defending and did not retreat half a step. After this round of smashing, the Dao ancestor let out a muffled groan and flew back. Duo also let out a scream and flew out like a kite with a broken string. Blood spurted out of his mouth. Zhonglu and the others, who had just caught their breaths, once again swarmed around Yishiwen and unleashed their killing moves from all directions. Duo had smashed a total of 18,000 hammers. How could it be so easy to withstand? Not to mention, the Tao ancestor had used his hands to withstand it. Now, not only were his hands dripping with blood, but his entire arm was numb. The Tao ancestor was very clear about Zhou Xiaoduo's cultivation level. He had thought that the 3,600 hammers at the beginning was already the limit of this kid. He should have been exhausted. If that was the case, he could have withstood it calmly and not lost his elegance at all. He could even take advantage of the situation to counterattack. Who would have thought that after 3,600 hammers, this guy would receive another 7,200 hammers? These 18,000 hammer strikes, especially the last 800 hammer strikes, the power was more than double or triple of what it had been in the previous battle. From then on, there was no way to dodge. He could only fight head-on. Then, his entire body was almost crippled. When Zhou Xiaoduo finally retreated, the Tao ancestor's side was almost out of strength and could not continue. However, Zhou Chonglu and the others swarmed forward. In particular, there was Zhou Xiaoyan in the middle. Their combat strength was not much inferior to Zhou Xiaoduo. After barely holding on for less than 10 breaths of time, with a long sigh, the Tao ancestor's clone was once again destroyed. Everyone heaved a long sigh of relief. Another victory. Moreover, it was a victory after eliminating the demon ancestor. It was very significant. This made everyone feel that the final victory was right in front of their eyes, and they were very close. Only Zhou Chonglu's expression became unprecedentedly serious. He warned solemnly, "Don't be careless. The Tao ancestor knows that his clone is not a match for all of us. But he insists on using his clone to fight. How can there be no purpose?" Everyone was stunned when they heard that. However, they were all battle-hardened people who had been through hundreds of battles. They instantly understood the severity of the matter. Indeed, this was a problem. If the Tao ancestor wanted to save face, it did not make sense. Would it be more honorable to be defeated? There was no such thing. This is already the 4th clone. Demon Emperor Jun's expression was a little solemn. There must be another reason. Everyone, be careful. As expected, 2 more clones of the Tao ancestor appeared. After everyone paid the price of some injuries, they were all successfully destroyed. Especially the last one. The Nether River Patriarch appeared. However, before he could take advantage of the gap to launch a sneak attack, he was killed by Zhou Xiaoyan and Zhou Xiaoduo. That was a nirvanic attack that killed him. The only numinous treasure he had left was the Yuan killer sword, which was riddled with scars. It was also in Zhou Xiaoduo's hands. It was a delightful result, but everyone felt more and more that something was wrong. The demon ancestor, Luo Ho, was defeated not long after he appeared. He attacked Zhou Xiaoduo. It was understandable that he lost in a battle of strength. However, the Nether River Patriarch was killed the moment he appeared. Furthermore, he died in a way that destroyed his soul. This seemed too strange. It was as if he had deliberately come out to die. Pay attention to the time. It's been 35 minutes. The Taiji painting gritted its teeth and said, it had blocked the heavenly Tao space for so long in one breath. Furthermore, it was the heavenly Tao space of a Tao ancestor. The Taiji painting was really using all its strength. Could it be stalling for time? It doesn't seem like it. Zhou Xiaoyan frowned and said, I feel a little uneasy. There seems to be a very terrifying feeling. It was not only her. Everyone present had experienced hundreds of battles and had sharp spiritual senses. Many of them already had that ominous feeling. This kind of warning sign of disaster had appeared countless times in their lives. However, every time it appeared, it was accompanied by nothing good. They had to run for their lives and had to deal with it. The remaining 32 people took a deep breath in unison. They were not stingy with the elixirs that could replenish their combat strength and stuff them into their mouths. If they did not eat it now, they might never have the chance to eat it again in their lives. It was not overboard no matter how cautious they were at this critical moment. As everyone waited, they were shocked to discover that a 7-colored vortex suddenly appeared in the space and rotated slowly. Chapter 1432. A green-robed figure with a smile on his face slowly grew bigger and appeared calmly in the middle of the vortex. Extraordinary indeed! The Tao ancestor appeared from the sky. His voice was still elegant, as if he did not care about the 6 doppelgangers being destroyed. He said lightly, "You are indeed the top of this world. Even my 6 saint doppelgangers are no match for you." 6 saint doppelgangers. These 4 words made Demon Emperor Donghuang and several Zhu Wu's faces change drastically. It turned out to be the 6 saint doppelgangers. In other words, the 6 saints were the 6 corners that supported the fate of heaven and earth, and now the 6 saints had left. The Tao ancestor chose to sacrifice the 6 doppelgangers in exchange for the fate of the 6 saints' remaining positions to increase his combat power. This should be a secret technique of the Tao ancestor. Demon Emperor Dijuan took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Could it be that you have already collected the fate of the 6 saints' positions before you came? Just that you haven't had time to refine it? Now that the space here is sealed and the thunder is fighting, it is the best place for you to refine it? That's why you decided to fight?" The Tao ancestor nodded lightly and said, "Your Majesty, you have some knowledge after all." "That's right, that's it." Everyone couldn't help but suck in a deep breath. If that was the case, wouldn't the consequences be too terrifying? Xiaoduo frowned and said, "Then what's the matter with the appearance of the Nether River Patriarch and his death?" The Tao ancestor explained patiently, "Just to increase the chance and the fate of the clan, just in case." "What about the demon ancestor Rahu?" Dijiang Zhu Wu asked in a deep voice. "Haha, you ask too many questions." The Tao ancestor put his hands behind his back and smiled. "If you don't make a move now, the time will be up." For a moment, everyone felt as if there was a piece of lead pressing down on their hearts. This time, the Tao ancestor's aura was obviously several times stronger than before. Just based on the feeling alone, it was already impossible to match up to him. It was as if everyone was an ant in his palm, and he could destroy them with a flip of his palm. Perhaps this was the demeanor of the number 1 person in the world in the true sense. However, once this understanding was born in their hearts, how could they fight this battle? Xiaoduo was shocked and puzzled at the same time. The Tao ancestor was so powerful. How could the fiend ancestor, who was as famous as the Tao ancestor, be so weak? Great Witch Dan Kong took a deep breath, turned his head, and looked at Flood. There was a deep meaning in his eyes. Flood's eyes turned red at once, and his tall body seemed to stiffen. He stood there in a daze, not moving at all. The veins on his neck bulged, and his entire aura became heavy and sorrowful. Great Witch Dan Kong grinned and laughed happily, as if he would return to the reunion of the brothers and the gathering of the 12 great witches. The pressure was great. However, the battle still had to continue. This battle was still the closest moment to defeating the Tao ancestor. If he missed this moment and this specific environment, the so-called defeat of the Tao ancestor was nothing more than an illusion. Apart from here, there was no other chance. There wasn't much time left. He had to seize the moment. Hearing a thunderous roar, Senior Flood Magus wielded the 1,000 Souls Nightmare Hammer and rushed up first, without thinking about his own safety. If there must be casualties, I'll start with her. Everyone also made their moves one after another. Each of them exerted their full strength. Shocking and world-shaking moves were thrown out as if they were free. Ordinary people might not be able to see the essence of the skills even once in a lifetime. At this moment, it was extremely gorgeous and brilliant, but it only lasted for a moment and passed in the blink of an eye. As for the great battle that was about to begin, the intensity of it was even greater than before. Yu Moyan rushed forward a little, because he was worried about Dugu Yen-er's comfort. The Tao ancestor aimed at the gap and slapped heavily on the sword. The long sword had almost no room to resist and was instantly broken. A thunderous force flowed along the broken sword and rushed into the meridians all over his body. In an instant, the meridians all over his body exploded. He fell out without a sound, and the blood all over his body spurted out like a fountain. Dugu Yen-er also followed in Yu Moyan's footsteps. The two of them were connected by heart. The success of the two wings match made their strength improve greatly. At the same time, they were able to resist the pressure together and share the effect of injuries. At this moment, Yumoyan was seriously injured, and so was Duguyen. Like Yumoyan, all the meridians all over her body exploded, and blood spurted out all over her body. No, if Duguyen didn't share the injury with Yumoyan, Yumoyan was destined to be smashed into pieces and his spirit destroyed. Demon Emperor Jun was shocked and shouted, "Everyone, be careful. Don't fight recklessly. Now he's several times stronger than before. He can kill people by transmitting his power through objects." Everyone was stunned when they heard this, and the sense of powerlessness in their hearts was even stronger than before. Yumoyan's cultivation was now at the peak of the half-saint realm, and he was only half a step away from the sage-to-be. However, even with such a strong cultivation and Duguyen-er's help to share the injury, he was actually destroyed by the transmission of power through objects. This was simply unbelievable. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, how could they believe it? How was he going to defend himself against such a powerful opponent? The real body of Tao Ancestor, whose divine power was like a prison, severely injured Yumoyan and his wife in one move. Fortunately, Li Chenglong stepped forward to block the attack, and Gao Chao quickly moved the two to the back to avoid the possibility of them continuing to bear the impact of the aftermath of the battle. At this moment, Zhou Xiaoduo, who was attacking aggressively, had already collided with the Tao Ancestor for hundreds of times. Among all the people present, only 6 people, Zhu Wu, Flood, Zhou Chonglu's family, Demon Emperor and Demon Empress Donghuang, and Li Chenglong, could fight head-on with the Tao Ancestor. The others didn't dare to fight head-on with the Tao Ancestor. Thinking of this, the heavy feeling in everyone's hearts increased by a few degrees. Even Zhou Xiaoduo was no exception. The Tao Ancestor was indeed the Tao Ancestor. He really deserved his reputation. His strength had obviously been greatly reduced, but he could still exert such a terrifying combat power. If the time limit was reached, how powerful would the Tao Ancestor be without any shackles and restrictions? Zhou Xiaoduo was burning with anxiety. What should we do? How can we reverse this bad situation? If the situation continued to develop like this, he was afraid that today they would really be wiped out. Everyone present, including Zhu Wu, Demon Emperor, and the others who had some understanding of the Tao Ancestor's strength, had never thought that the Tao Ancestor would still be so powerful in the face of the joint attack of so many sage-to-be sages even after his strength had been greatly reduced. They were still far from being his match. This was clearly the most perfect design he had ever made. There were targets everywhere, suppression everywhere, unexpected and unexpected. There were even heaven-defying monsters like Zhou Xiaoduo and Zhou Xiaonian helping in the battle. But the Tao Ancestor still broke through with absolute strength. Even if they wouldn't be completely wiped out here, the Tao Ancestor's strength would definitely be stronger when they got out of here. Once he went to settle the score with them, they would only be defeated one by one. There was even less hope. At the right time, Xiaolong's voice sounded in Zhou Xiaoduo's heart. At this moment, the battle is fierce and dangerous. We can only take a risk. Master, swallow and absorb a large amount of luck points and try to break through. If your strength is further improved, you may be able to compete with the people in front of you. Alas, if the space-exterminating pagoda can be more perfect, it can greatly increase your strength. Unfortunately, distant water can't help a nearby fire. Zhou Xiaoduo sighed. He now had a huge amount of luck points in his hands, tens of billions of luck points in reserve. But when it came to perfecting the space-exterminating pagoda, most of the supreme-grade heavenly materials and earthly treasures with spatial attributes in this world were basically in his hands. How could he get more? Now, there was really no other way. He could only choose to take a risk and take a risk. Zhou Xiaoduo made up his mind and absorbed 1,000 drops of luck points. In an instant, his meridians immediately showed signs of swelling and tearing. Abundant spiritual energy whistled into his meridians, and a feeling that his whole body was about to explode suddenly attacked him. Zhou Xiaoduo felt that his body was filled with a huge amount of power. He couldn't feel better if he didn't release it. The only thought in his mind was to wave his sledgehammer and rush forward with a roar. He launched a fierce attack without any regard for his own safety, and it was almost disorderly. Boom! Boom! And in the next dozens of consecutive strikes, he was actually on par with the Tao ancestor. Seeing that Zhou Xiaoduo had taken on most of the Tao ancestor's attacks and seemed to have some leeway, everyone couldn't help but take a breath of relief. They were still afraid in their hearts. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. If they continued to fight, there would inevitably be casualties. Everyone knew this in their hearts and had already reached a consensus. What they didn't know was that although Zhou Xiaoduo looked majestic and insufferably arrogant now, he was actually full of helplessness in his heart. Because through this round of fighting, he had roughly judged a conclusion. According to his current situation, absorbing 2,000 drops of luck points at once was already his limit. And now, he was doing his best to fight desperately, seemingly on par with the Tao ancestor. However, he was just using the absorbed power for other purposes and not really integrating it into his body. In other words, at least in a short period of time, this method was not to improve his true strength. This also showed another thing. As long as the other party adapted to his current rhythm, then it would be his turn to suffer again. As expected, after 100 hammers, the Tao ancestor let out a long laugh and punched heavily on the 9-9 cat hammer. Just like the previous strong collision, the flesh fist hit the hammer hard, but the result was very different. With a muffled boom, Xiaojiu, who was attached to the 9-9 kitty hammer, let out a miserable cry and was almost shattered. As for Zhou Xiaoduo, he retreated 100 feet as if he had been electrocuted. The Tao ancestor, who had repelled the enemy with a punch, suddenly moved and grabbed the mace in Changliang Zuwu's hand. Changliang Zuwu wanted to let go and retreat, but it was too late. Changliang only felt as if his whole body had been electrocuted, and his meridians felt as if they were about to explode. Then, his whole body was pulled over by the Tao ancestor. The powerful Zhu Wu's body was actually unable to resist. Gong Gong Emperor, Demon Emperor Jiang, and the others were all shocked. They hurriedly rushed up to help, but they saw Tao ancestor draw a weird circle with his other hand. A magical power emerged, mixed with the power of Tao, and blocked all the people outside. Then, the mace turned into powder with a crisp bang. Then, Changliang Zuwu screamed and fell down softly. His soul, divine sense, and physical life were all shattered like the mace, scattering in all directions like dust. At the instant that everyone's eyes almost split apart from rage, the candle dragon let out a shrill howl as well, and then half of its body suddenly vanished and transformed into powder. The Flood Witch and the others rushed forward bravely and attacked with all their might. However, in the next moment, the candle dragon's body exploded like a bomb. Just now, he was the closest and had made up his mind to self-explode, hoping to cause serious damage to the Tao ancestor. However, the Tao ancestor had already seen through his plan and would not give him a chance. He shattered half of his body through the air, so self-exploding naturally did not work. His original action was equivalent to sending himself to the Tao ancestor's door, and he was completely destroyed by the other punch. When everyone saw that Zhou Xiaoduo had suddenly shown his power and seemed to have suppressed the Tao ancestor, they heaved a sigh of relief. Then the situation changed again. It was getting worse and worse, and it was almost out of control. As Zhu Wu, Changliang, and the candle dragon died one after another, Xiang Chong and Zhan Xuejuan were also seriously injured. This was still not enough. The team was usually well-trained, and the small team cooperated well with each other. They would always work together to resist and share the attack. Otherwise, at least one or two of the three would have died. However, even so, the three of them were seriously injured and could no longer fight. Zhu Wu and Di Jiang, who were at the side, went completely crazy at this moment. Their brothers were turning into ashes in front of them one after another, and they did not even have time to say a word. What a tragic reality! In fact, it was not only Di Jiang. The hearts of the remaining 4 ancestral sorcerers had been broken into pieces. At this point, there was no reason to speak of. They only wanted to rush forward and perish together with the opponent in front of them. They wanted to die together with the enemy. Zhou Xiaoduo roared and rushed forward again, waving the 9x9 cat hammer wildly. This time, he absorbed a total of 2,000 drops of luck points in one go. This was already the upper limit that he estimated that he could bear at the moment. It was also because of this that his movement speed and explosive power suddenly soared to the extreme. It was an unprecedented extreme. It was also because of this that he was ahead of Di Jiang and the others. The reason why Zhou Xiaoduo went to this extreme was very simple. If he allowed Di Jiang and Zhu Wu to die impulsively like this, it would not help the overall situation at all. His team would only suffer a serious loss of combat power, and there would be even less hope. The death of Zhu Wu and the Candle Dragon was a clear proof. A simple self-explosion could not threaten the Tao ancestor at all. It would only be a waste of their lives. The 9x9 cat hammer suddenly enlarged and waved wildly, blocking the way forward of Di Jiang and the others. It was also at this moment Grand Magus Dan Kong, who had not participated in the siege since the beginning of the battle, suddenly moved. Well, Dan Kong had participated in the previous 6 battles to destroy the doppelgangers. But now, in the face of the Tao ancestor's true body, Grand Magus Dan Kong's strength was not enough. No matter how angry he was, he could only watch from the side. But because of this, his strength and vitality had been greatly restored, and he had recovered 90% of his normal state. However, this 90% strength was insignificant for the Tao ancestor's true body. But at this moment he moved. With his unique space power, he activated the limit of teleportation. Teleportation and space power were the best skills of Grand Magus Dan Kong, and they were also the skills that he had the highest attainment in. But this time he did not attack with it. Instead, with a teleportation, he came in front of the Tao ancestor instantly. He opened his hands and used his head and chest to welcome Zhou Xiaoduo's hammer. He stared at Zhou Xiaoduo with only calmness and guilt in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Xiaoduo." Boom! Zhou Xiaoduo's hammer with all his strength was meant to stop the enemy and protect his friends. But he never dreamed that Grand Magus Dan Kong would suddenly appear and block his hammer with his body, as if he was protecting the Tao ancestor. However, the momentum of the hammer had reached its end, and there was no time to stop or even weaken the power of the hammer. With a loud bang, the 9-9 cat hammer crazily smashed into the chest of Senior Witch Dan Kong. The huge hammer smashed his head into pieces, and his entire body was turned into powder under the unparalleled wind of the hammer. Everyone was dumbfounded. Only Zhou Xiaoduo's roar could be heard in the air. "What are you doing? Bastard! Why are you doing this?" Even the Tao ancestor was stunned at this moment. He also couldn't figure it out. Why did this Wu people Dan Kong sacrifice his life to protect him at this time? This shouldn't be. It didn't make sense. Even if he saw that he had the upper hand and wanted to turn around and surrender to him, he didn't need to show his loyalty like this. He just put his head under Zhou Xiaoduo's hammer and died inexplicably. Why was this? What was his purpose? But then, the Tao ancestor, who had lived in the world for countless years and accumulated infinite wisdom, seemed to understand something. His puzzled eyes suddenly turned into anger. Dan Kong! The raging fire Grand Magus and the ice-deep Magus's twisted and sorrowful expression became a little more understanding. With the destruction of Grand Magus Dan Kong's divine soul, Zhou Xiaoduo suddenly felt that there was a huge change inside the Tower of Annihilation, a huge change that almost shook the world. The whole Tower of Annihilation was roaring and turbulent. It seemed that the whole world was expanding, becoming broader, stronger, and closer to perfection. If the previous Tower of Annihilation had the embryonic form of a world, then the current Tower of Annihilation was the embryonic form of a world. The former was still not a world, but the latter was a real world. With the birth of the world, mysterious Taoist connotation suddenly flashed on Zhou Xiaoduo's body. His momentum and cultivation were increasing at an amazing rate. It seemed that there was no upper limit and it continued to grow endlessly. It seemed that the surging spiritual qi, even if it really made Zhou Xiaoduo explode, could still continue to grow without limit. The Tao ancestor's eyes flashed, and he suddenly attacked Zhou Xiaoduo. He attacked with all his strength. He intended to kill with one blow, and he attacked with all his strength. At this time, Duo felt that his whole body and mind were dizzy because of the sudden surge of abundant spiritual qi. Coupled with the shock of Grand Magus Dan Kong's sudden death under his hammer, he couldn't resist, and he staggered and made bad moves. Stop him! The great flood which rushed forward as if his life depended on it. The Tower of Annihilation is being perfected. It's comparable to the Tao Ancestors level. You must stop him. With a roar, the first to react were Zhuo Chonglu and Wu Yuding. So that's it. The truth of Grand Magus Dan Kong's inexplicable death should be here. No matter how powerful the Tower of Annihilation had become, the origin of the Tower of Annihilation was to destroy Grand Magus Dan Kong. This was the established destiny of the Tower of Annihilation. Destiny. Even though the relationship with the Umno Alliance was eased later, and they fought side by side against the enemy, and the past grievances were gradually put aside, the original mission given to the Tower of Annihilation was never completed. Thinking back, when Zhuo Duo got the Tower of Annihilation, he also made an oath to kill Grand Magus Dan Kong. This karma would not change because of the change of position. Zhuo Duo's Tower of Annihilation had all the conditions to become a complete world. The only thing it lacked was its own karma. Now, Grand Magus Dan Kong died under Zhuo Duo's hammer, and the karma was completed. The destiny of the Tower of Annihilation was completed, and a world was formed. From now on, the Tower of Annihilation was no longer the Tower of Annihilation, but a small world, a complete and perfect small world. Yes, it was a complete and perfect small world, but not perfect. It was because of the factor of the Good Fortune Jade Disc. Only by getting the Good Fortune Jade Disc could the small world be perfect, but this had nothing to do with the destiny of the Tower of Annihilation. On this point, when the source of Zhuo Duo's small world was known by the Wu tribe, great which Dan Kong already had an idea in his heart. At that time, the Tower of Annihilation was just a huge space equipment, so Grand Magus Dan Kong didn't feel anything. At most, he was often joked about. At that time, the 12 Grand Magi of the Umno Alliance were all there, and their destiny was complete. If the world didn't change, the 12 Grand Magi would never fall. No matter what kind of karma it was difficult. Especially at that time, the relationship between them had eased a lot, so Zhuo Duo had no position to go against Grand Magus Dan Kong. Until Zhu Wu was rescued, Zhuo Duo also came to discuss several times. In order to eliminate the disputes between the two continents, after the small world was formed, could it be loaded with the small world? And then perfectly solve the problem of Clear Heaven's Doom. Grand Magus Dan Kong vaguely had an idea. So, for this, he specially consulted Xianming Zhu Wu, who had a stronger space ability than himself. At that time, Ancestral which Xianming laughed with a bit of schadenfreude and explained, if this is the case, if Dan Kong does not die, the extermination tower will never become a small world. How can a small world be so easy to achieve? If the small world is formed, what will happen? Done. This kid will be the creator of the world. Xianming Zhu Wu said, it's similar to Pangu's father god. His strength will increase to the level of invincibility in an instant. Unfortunately, this kid's world is destined to be complete. You are one of the keys to the perfection of the Wu people's destiny. Both are destined to be difficult. Xianming Zhu Wu wouldn't help Zhuo Duo no matter what position he was in. Naturally, he kept this matter a secret. In fact, it wasn't difficult to achieve this condition. As long as Grand Magus Dan Kong fell in the hands of Zhuo Duo, the destiny of the Tower of Annihilation would be complete, and there would be no more karma. The Tower of Annihilation would no longer be the Tower of Annihilation, and the world would be formed. However, at this time, the two continents were cooperating, and Dan Kong and Zhuo Duo had a good relationship. How could Zhuo Duo kill Dan Kong? Not to mention that Zhuo Duo didn't know the trick of this matter. Even if Zhuo Duo knew, he wouldn't do it. At that time, Xianming Zhu Wu didn't mean it, but Grand Magus Dan Kong listened attentively. After a few days, Grand Magus Dan Kong found the flood which again to discuss the achievement of Zhuo Duo's small world. However, the flood which firmly rejected it. Don't let your imagination run wild. Putting aside the fact that the integrity of the 12 great sorcerers is related to the fate of the sorcerer tribe, It doesn't make sense for us to die for the sake of a space treasure of Zhuoxiaoduo. There is absolutely no room for discussion. For this matter, the flood which beat Dan Kong up. From then on, Dan Kong was forbidden to meet Zhuoxiaoduo. Grand Magus Dan Kong didn't want to die. Who would really want to die if they could live? So the matter had been dragged on like this. However, in the previous scuffle between the three clans, 3 of the 12 Grand Magi were killed. The so-called destiny of the Wu people was perfect and no longer existed. Grand Magus Dan Kong, who had already let go of the knot in his heart, raised it again. However, he didn't discuss this matter with others. Today, the war was fierce and dangerous. The powerhouses of the 3 clans were killed one after another. Zhu Wu and several of his brothers were also killed. Grand Magus Dan Kong, who knew that he couldn't do anything to the Tao ancestor, made a decision. He decided to use his own life to facilitate this destiny and end the karma. He didn't want to see his brothers die one by one. The seniors of the Wu people fell one by one. He was powerless. He couldn't even participate in the war because he was too weak. Did he want to see his brothers die one by one? Only he, a waste who couldn't even participate in the war, was left to be strangled to death in the end? Seeing the Tao ancestor's earth-shattering strength and the fact that everyone was not his opponent, even if they joined forces to besiege him, Grand Magus Dan Kong was determined to fight with his life. Finally, he used his space teleportation for the last time. He let himself stand in front of the Tao ancestor and die under Zhuoxiaoduo's hammer. Therefore, his last eyes were full of guilt towards Zhuoxiaoduo, because he knew that no matter what the result of his death was, whether Zhuoxiaoduo was promoted or not, the pain of killing his friends with his own hands was bound to be borne by Zhuoxiaoduo himself. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to. Grand Magus Dan Kong thought so. So, I'm sorry, Zhuoxiaoduo. Zhuoxiaoduo certainly did not know about the entanglement of karma and destiny between the Great Witch Dan Kong and the Tower of Annihilation. In fact, it was not only him, even Zhuo Zhonglu and the others did not know about it. Even though their cultivation was high enough, they were limited by their knowledge and experience. They simply could not realize the real relationship between the Great Witch Dan Kong and the Tower of Annihilation. What's more, they didn't think that the formation of a world was actually related to karma. However, when Grand Magus Dan Kong died, the Tower of Destruction suddenly changed, and Zhuoxiaoduo suddenly became stronger for no reason. Everyone vaguely realized this point. After all, everyone knew the original origin of Zhuoxiaoduo's Tower of Destruction. From this to the other, they were naturally enlightened. In an instant, everyone risked their lives and rushed forward, including the remaining 4 Zhu Wu, the Demon Emperor and the Demon Empress. Even the seriously injured Yu Moyan and others rushed forward, because everyone knew that if this stalemate continued, they would definitely lose. They must give Zhuoxiaoduo a chance to improve his strength. If the Tao ancestor killed Zhuoxiaoduo before he finished upgrading, then there would be no hope in this battle. Now all the hope in this battle was on Zhuoxiaoduo. All the hope was that, after this upgrade, Zhuoxiaoduo could have the strength comparable to the Tao ancestor. Otherwise, there would still be no hope in this battle. Everyone's only bargaining chip. Grand Magus Dan Kong could sacrifice his life to fulfill his wish. Would they cherish death? As for Zhuoxiaoduo, he was kicked out by the flood which at the first moment. Boom, boom, boom. The Tao ancestor also seemed to realize something and began to attack with all his strength, all killing moves. People were constantly being hit and sent flying. Yu Moyan, Wan Li Xiu, Dugu Yen Gao Chao Zhen Piapiao and the others were already seriously injured. After one attack, they were directly lying on the ground and vomiting blood. They completely lost the ability to fight and could only wait passively for the sky-mending stone to heal them. Gao Chao struggled to climb to the side of Wan Li Xiu, who had used up the sky-mending stone. She pulled the hand of the unconscious Wan Li Xiu and put it on her chest. The sky-mending stone didn't have much energy left. The remaining energy could barely ensure that the 2 women didn't die. Until now, Gao Chao was still trying her best to fulfill the responsibility of the logistics chief of the brigade. Just as she finished, she saw Xiang Chong, Xiang Bing and Long Yuxing being smashed out and vomiting blood. They fell heavily on the ground and couldn't move. Then, the raging fire Grand Magus couple and the icy nether Grand Magus were hit and sent flying. They were also on the verge of death. Xiang Chong and the others hurried over and used the method that Gao Chao had just used to save the three of them. But there was no doubt that the above 11 people had completely lost the ability to fight. They were destined to not be able to fight in the following battle. No, it should be 13 people. Yu Yen and Zhan Xuejuan were also hit and sent flying. Zhou Chonglu, who had blocked half of the attacks for them, vomited 5 to 6 mouthfuls of blood. He staggered and couldn't breathe, almost unable to continue fighting. Kuan Peng Demon Master saw that things were not good. At the critical moment, he transformed into his original form and used his huge body to block in front of Zhou Chonglu and the others, taking the attack of the Tao Ancestor. Donghuang Bell immediately stood in front of Kuan Peng to protect him and took the attack of the Tao Ancestor. But with a loud bang, half of Kuan Peng Demon Master's body was smashed. Pieces of flesh flew all over the sky. His body flew out hundreds of times and rolled on the ground silently. After the loud bang, Donghuang Bell let out another cry. Cracks appeared on the bell that had never been damaged. His Majesty Donghuang, who was connected to the bell, vomited blood and his face was pale. With another loud bang, Vermilion Bird, Black Tortoise, Yu Xingchen, Lei Zhongtian and the others joined forces to block the follow-up attack that was smashing towards Donghuang. One by one, they spat out mouthfuls of blood and flew backwards. Many pieces of their internal organs appeared along with the blood they spat out. They had also completely lost the ability to fight. At this point, there were only 11 people left in the allied forces. Zhou Chonglu, Wu Yuding, Zhou Xiaonian, Donghuang, Demon King, Demon Empress, Flood, Gonggong, Dijiang, Tianwu, and Xian Ming. Moreover, all of them were injured and their combat power was greatly reduced. The 11 of them continued to use their remaining strength to attack and resist desperately. However, the situation was getting worse and worse. The strength of the Tao Ancestor was too terrifying. At this moment, his main focus was basically on Zhou Chonglu, Zhou Xiaonian, and Demon King Donghuang, Flood, and the others. The most important one was Zhou Xiaonian. If it were not for the many layers of protection on Zhou Xiaonian's body and the sword chi left by sect leader Tongtian, which blocked a few fatal attacks for her, even if Zhou Xiaonian's strength was the best among all of them, she would at least be seriously injured and lose her combat power. Everyone was fighting desperately and roaring in their hearts. Zhou Xiaoduo, hurry up! Chapter 1433. Zhou Xiaoduo, who had temporarily left the battlefield, only felt that he was receiving an inexplicable infusion from head to toe. The meridians in his body were constantly being washed by this enormous spiritual energy. Even his soul and divine sense were transforming and being reborn. In the Tower of Annihilation, the embryonic form of the world was formed. Earth, fire, water, and wind were all present. Countless mountains and seas were emerging one after another. The sky was getting higher and higher, until the end could not be seen. The earth was getting thicker and thicker, carrying all things. Countless stars were densely packed in the sky. Countless Taoist rhythms were being produced bit by bit, constantly rotating in the air and flowing on the earth. That every cell in his body was cheering, constantly increasing its energy. Even his hair felt like it was being reborn from the inside out. Too slow. Faster. 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 Ah! Zhou Xiaoduo was crazily shouting and urging in his heart. In the Tower of Annihilation, the embryonic form of the world was finally established. The structure was fixed. Everything was trembling madly, turbulent, and expanding. The Tower of Annihilation, which had lost its obsession and completed its destiny mission. The changes at this moment were infinitely terrifying. The realm was also instantly turned upside down, and the sea turned into mulberry fields. The original mountains were flattened, and the original flatland turned into an ocean. The originally sparse forest was wildly expanding. Small trees, like balloons, grew and thickened. Gradually, it became 3 people's embrace, 5 people's embrace. The trunks of the trees towered into the clouds. The dense forest stretched out as far as the eye could see, as if to the end of the world. Countless cliffs, countless cliffs, countless mountains, countless lakes, countless seawater, countless. There were even snowy mountains, glaciers, and there were also some creatures that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere suddenly. There were birds and beasts, and Xiao Duo felt that his entire spirit and cultivation were expanding along with the expansion of the world. He trembled, exhilarated, and lost that it was as if he was having a strange, absurd, and bizarre dream that was absolutely real. He anxiously thought, "Wake up! Wake up! The battle outside is very dangerous." He kept urging. His heart was burning with anxiety. He didn't know how much time had passed. Perhaps it was an instant, perhaps it was a moment, or perhaps it was a lifetime. Finally, it stopped. Xiao Duo only felt that the earth-shaking throbbing in his soul had disappeared. His entire body suddenly felt relaxed. He abruptly opened his eyes. He didn't even have time to sense the changes in his body or the progress in his cultivation. He immediately summoned the 99 Kitty Hammer. With a roar, he rushed into the battle. With a thought, he scanned the battlefield with his divine sense. Everyone on his side was on the verge of collapse. Regardless of whether it was the Demon Emperor and Demon Empress Donghuang, or Zhou Chonglu and his wife, they were all vomiting blood as they fought. They were barely holding on, completely ignoring the blood that was continuously flowing out of their mouths, noses, and facial orifices. That was a sign that his internal organs had been severely shaken and he had suffered extreme internal injuries. The situation was extremely critical. Everyone was only holding on with their willpower. Just as Xiao Duo rushed forward, the Tao ancestor swept his palm fiercely. While everyone was trying their best to resist, his palm suddenly turned into 7 palms and pierced through the trees. Wu Yuding let out a muffled groan. She had already been slapped on the shoulder. With a cracking sound, her entire shoulder was smashed, and she flew out like a kite with a broken string. "Mom!" Xiao Duo shouted and flew forward to catch Wu Yuding. He quickly stuffed a pill into his mouth and then raised his sledgehammer and rushed into the battle. As soon as he thought about it, he arrived above the Tao ancestor at an unimaginable speed. An unprecedentedly ferocious aura blasted towards the Tao ancestor. There was also an extremely gentle force that gently pushed everyone away. At the same time, 2 bottles of elixirs were thrown into Zhou Xiaoyin's arms. It was the 9 Revolutions golden pill. With a crisp bang, the 99 cat hammer was like thunder and lightning. It instantly evolved into a sea of thunder and lightning. It quickly condensed above the head of the Tao ancestor. Then, like a river of thunder, the thunder and lightning poured down. For a moment, the entire space within 1,000 feet was filled with the black and white colors generated by Zhou Xiaoduo's 99 cat hammer. The Tao runes circulated one after another, turning into a thunderstorm that was infinitely arrogant. Such a Tao rune was actually a completely unfamiliar Tao rune. It was a Tao rune that did not belong to this world. Seeing that an unprecedented attack was approaching, a divine sword appeared in the Tao ancestor's hand. The sword was as clear as water, and its style was ancient. However, it was naturally mixed with an aura of a ruler descending to the world. It was as if once the sword was out, all the living beings in the entire space, regardless of the mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas, had to bow their heads and worship it. "The name of the sword is Chun Jun," the Tao ancestor said calmly. "It has already been 100,000 yuan hui. It has yet to appear in the mortal world." With a sway of the sword, it had already transformed into thousands of cold lights. Every sword light accurately blocked the enemy's hammer. There was no mistake. However, Zhou Xiaoduo did not retreat at all. He did not give in at all and fought fiercely. At this moment, Zhou Xiaoduo felt that his cultivation base was about to explode. Even now, his meridians were still absorbing the spirit qi that was gushing in. They were still expanding and becoming stronger. There was more than enough to go around, and it was endless. At that moment, Zhou Xiaoduo roared, "What sword can compare to my cat hammer?" The Tao ancestor stared at the 2 hammers and personally felt the thunderous impact of the 2 hammers. The muscles on his face twitched, and there was an inexplicable expression in his eyes. It was the same expression as the Flood Witches when she heard the name of the two hammers. Such a divine artifact. Even if it fought head-on with a peerless divine sword like the Chunjun sword, it was not at a disadvantage at all. It even took the initiative and suppressed the heaven-defying divine weapon of the Chunjun sword. It was actually called such a name. If you don't know how to name it, then don't name it, okay? You are ruining the style of such a divine artifact for no reason. The collision did not stop, and the battle between the two of them became more and more intense. Out of everyone's expectations, Zuo, whose strength had improved by leaps and bounds as soon as he started, continued to fight with the Tao ancestor, and his cultivation was still improving by leaps and bounds. As time passed, he actually became more and more powerful. From the beginning, he was not proficient and not very harmonious. Gradually, he climbed to the great perfection. It seemed that his foundation was unstable, and his realm was unstable. It was difficult for his moves and routines to match the sudden improvement of his cultivation. However, in the continuous battle, everything was harmonious. In just a moment, regardless of his foundation, realm, or moves, they seemed to have been precipitated and tempered for hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of years. They were perfect. The situation of the battle also changed from being at a disadvantage at the beginning, to gradually recovering the situation, to being at a slight disadvantage but attacking and defending, until they were evenly matched. Xiaoduo's speed of improvement was so fast that it made people flabbergasted and unable to believe it. This subtle feeling of witnessing the occurrence of a miracle with their own eyes made everyone feel that what they saw in front of them was absurd. But it was true. They never knew that the speed and extent of a person's cultivation could be so fast and so great. Looking at Zuo Xiaoduo, who was now fighting with the Tao ancestor and was not at a disadvantage at all, everyone felt that their worldview had been subverted. In other words, it had been subverted long ago. How many years had it been since Zuo Xiaoduo entered the Tao and cultivated? In terms of human time, it was only a total of more than 20 years. Even with the variation of the flow of time in the Tower of Emptiness, 1 day was 1,000 days, and 1 year was 1,000 years. All in all, it was only a few thousand years. However, his current cultivation was already on par with the Tao ancestor, the most powerful person in the world for countless years. This was not just a miracle. It should be called a miracle, a legend, a super legend. Xiaoduo's strength was still increasing, and his cultivation was also deepening. Now, his state was like a sea, and there was always the water of the Yangtze River pouring into it with a surging momentum, constantly strengthening the foundation of the sea. It was more and more surging, more and more like a raging tide. The sound of the collision between the hammer and the sword was still dense, but the body of the Tao ancestor was obviously trembling, and the expression on his face was unprecedentedly dignified. There was not much time left. Everyone had excellent eyesight, and they all saw that the Tao ancestor still had enough strength to support Zuo Xiaoduo's attack. Although it seemed that Zuo Xiaoduo now had the upper hand, it was still impossible to defeat the Tao ancestor in a short time. If the current situation continued, the two sides would be evenly matched. Another 3 days and 3 nights might not be enough to determine the winner. However, the power that sealed this space was only left with less than 10 minutes. The 1-hour time limit given by the Taiji diagram was about to pass. Once Dao Zhu regained his connection with the outside world, even if Zuo Xiaoduo had become the lord of a world, it would still be of no use as it was still too early, because the Tao ancestor, who was free of the shackles, could mobilize the power of the entire ancestral land, which was beyond the power level of Zuo Xiaoduo's power. Thinking of this, Zuo Chonglu, Wu Yuding, and Zuo Xiaoyan, who had just rested for 2 minutes and slightly recovered their vitality, took a step forward together. At the same time, the Demon Emperor, Demon Empress, and Donghuang, the 3 giants of the Demon Clan, also took a step forward together. Flood and the 4 Zhu Wu also took a step forward. The auras of the 11 peerless experts merged into one and surged out together. Under the influence of the aura, even the Tao ancestor had to divert part of his energy to pay attention to their movements. But now, things were different. The situation was very different now. Just now, he could ignore it because the attack just now was not a threat to him at all. Naturally, he could handle it with ease. But now, there was Zuo Xiaoduo, an opponent who was comparable to him, restraining him head-on. The situation was unprecedentedly bad. Coupled with these powerful enemies on the other side, it was not only one disaster after another, but it was also in imminent danger. How could he not pay attention? Duo felt that the spiritual aura in his body was boiling, and for a moment, he was in high spirits. But at the same time, he could not help but be anxious. Because he also knew that there was no way to determine the winner, and if this stalemate continued, his side would be finished. The time left for him was not much. According to the current situation of the battle, even if his parents and others joined the battle and participated in the siege, there was not enough time. Now, 51 minutes had passed, and there were only 9 minutes left before the shackles of this space would lose effect. At that time, everyone would die without a burial place. Xiao, Yun Zhonghu, Bai Yunduo, and Zhu Yan were still in the space of the Tower of Annihilation. If Xiao and Bai Yunduo came out at this time, not only would they not play a role in surprise, but they would also lose their lives in vain. As for Zhu Yan, Xiaoduo thought about it again, and finally decided to call it out to help. It was not that Zhu Yan's cultivation was much stronger than Bai Yunduo and Xiao, and it was enough to change the situation of the battle, but Xiaoduo felt that Zhu Yan had a strategic role, and the role it could play might be beyond imagination. This was a gamble, but so far, the gamble with Zhu Yan as the wager had always been the victory of his side. This matter was mysterious, but the result was the same, and he had to admit it. At the very least, Zhu Yan's spiritual deterrence effect was strong enough. In view of this, Xiaoduo's heart stirred. Yaya! Zhu Yan raised its mace and rushed out with a howl. The poison of misfortune was like a sharp, poisonous arrow, shooting at the Tao ancestor with power. Bang! The Tao ancestor casually sent it flying with a palm. His face calm and without any change, as if he did not care at all. However, deep in his eyes, there was a sudden flash. Why was this unlucky thing here too? Back then, it was this bastard who suddenly appeared and caused the complete creation disk to only have a little core left. It was also the origin of the creation jade disk that this was the greatest jinx since the creation of the world, the greatest jinx since ancient times. The beast of misfortune. Nothing good happened to anyone who saw it, no exception. To actually encounter this thing in such a battle that would decide the world. How inauspicious, the Tao ancestor muttered in his heart. As everyone swarmed forward, the situation of the battle continued to tilt and was completely reversed. The Tao ancestor was suppressed to a disadvantage by the joint forces of everyone. This was still the strength of the others and Xiaoduo showing too great a gap. As for Xiaoduo, it was because of an accident that his cultivation strength suddenly increased. Naturally, there was no such thing as rehearsing in advance, and the cooperation between them was very disjointed. Although the Tao ancestor was forced to a disadvantage, it was not to the extent that he was completely powerless to fight back. He resisted stubbornly and did not lose. Time passed bit by bit, and everyone became more and more anxious. There was almost not enough time. There were still the last 6 minutes. Although the outcome of a battle between experts was only in an instant, how could an undying and indestructible powerhouse like the Tao ancestor be resolved in an instant? As time passed bit by bit, the Tao ancestor became more and more accustomed to finding loopholes in everyone's cooperation and taking the opportunity to counterattack. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More than a dozen shadows suddenly flashed from the Tao ancestor's body and flew to attack everyone. As for his true body, he took a step across space and arrived in front of Li Chenglong, grabbing at Li Chenglong's throat. This attack was bound to succeed. At this moment, the Tao ancestor was completely confident that this guy would definitely die under this attack of his. He had long calculated in his heart that the greatest difficulty in this battle was not Xiaoduo's sudden increase in strength, but Li Chenglong, this guy, who was in overall control of the overall situation. It was his manipulation and command that made up for the gap in strength between everyone. Otherwise, someone would have died long ago. This guy's command was too accurate. He had to kill this guy as soon as possible. A hand instantly grabbed Li Chenglong's throat. Li Chenglong roared angrily and wanted to parry, but it was too late. The Tao ancestor's attack was too fast, too fast. Swish! Even if it was Xiaoduo, it was already too late for him to save him. Just as he was feeling cold in his heart, an arrow, in an even more unexpected and abrupt manner, tore the space from the sky and turned the entire space from the sky to the earth into a black hole of eternal annihilation. Pai Yibao, who had never made a move since the start of the battle, finally made a move. Facing an existence like the Tao ancestor, Pai Yibao's attack was to gather all his soul and divine sense power and the limit of his cultivation. Because he knew that he only had a chance to shoot this arrow. It was not because there was no second chance against the Tao ancestor, but also because he had no combat power after this arrow. Therefore, Pai Yibao had been waiting for this opportunity, afraid that he would miss it. He stood quietly in the void. Even though the battle below was extremely tragic, he still did not make a move. He watched as the experts on his side were sacrificed, but he did not make a move, because he felt that it was not an opportunity. Previously, when the Tao ancestors' 6 clones were fighting, Pai Yibao did not move at all. He did not even circulate his energy. He felt that it was useless to make a move. But now, he finally made a move. The opportunity was here. Even this time, he did not make a move to save Li Chenglong. But the real time was right. The Tao ancestor used his clones to force the others away. His true body rushed towards Li Chenglong. The target was pure and direct. There was no doubt about the effect. However, the process of this action was obviously too much. This attack that was bound to succeed would no longer deviate midway. Therefore, at this moment, Pai Yibao gathered all his soul, divine sense, and cultivation, and shot down. The speed of this arrow surpassed everything. It even surpassed Zhou Xiaoduo and the Tao ancestor who used all his strength. Once the arrow was shot, Pai Yibao, who was in the air, no longer had any strength. He floated down weakly like a piece of paper. If no one caught him, he could even fall to his death, because his entire person was now more empty than an empty shell. Within a year, he would not be able to make such an arrow a second time. The Tao ancestor's fingers had already felt the temperature of Li Chenglong's neck. Suddenly, the top of his head turned cold. Swoosh! An arrow pierced through the top of his head. Relying on a cultivator's instinct for danger, his body instinctively leaned back. However, this arrow had already entered his head. The pain at this moment could be said to be unprecedented. It was as if his soul was split. Even with the Tao ancestor's temperament, he could not help but roar to the sky. Li Chenglong did not know why he was able to escape death. However, with an astonishing reaction, he rolled over and dodged more than 100 feet away. However, he still felt a chill in his throat. Pai Yibao's ultimate arrow was 3 feet long. At this moment, it was more than a foot into the Tao ancestor's head. However, it was the first time since the start of the battle that they had seriously injured the Tao ancestor's true body. It was an unprecedented injury. The Tao ancestor was in so much pain that he wanted to die. The auspicious clouds under his feet disappeared and gathered on his head. He wanted to recover quickly. Suddenly, he let out another roar. His thick cultivation base wrapped around his wound, and an arrow shot out from his head, mixed with red and white blood. It rushed into the sky. The Tao ancestor's face turned even paler. This arrow had actually used up all of his reserved potential, leaving nothing behind. Moreover, he was still seriously injured. At this moment, his hatred was incomparable. He was filled with anger. However, until now, he still did not know why there was this arrow. Why was there an enemy who was not under his perception? At a glance, he saw Pai Yibao, who was like a withered leaf. He could see his cultivation level at a glance, half-step sage. He was only a half-step sage. The Tao ancestor was extremely angry, but he was even more confused. Although a half-step sage cultivator was at the top level of cultivators in the world and had a chance to hurt him, to seriously injure him, there were at least 3 factors. None of them could be missing. Firstly, he did not know the existence of this person. He had never noticed it from the beginning to the end. Could such a person exist? Secondly, in order to hurt him, the other party had to integrate all his cultivation strength, life, and soul into one attack. Only then could it reach the level of injuring his Tao body. Thirdly, even if the above two conditions were met, the extreme outburst of a half-step saint would only be able to injure him. It would not be able to inflict serious injuries on him. This was because there would still be some energy left after breaking through his protective Yuan Qi. Even if he was injured, it would only be a flesh wound. However, just now, he had forced out several clones, forcefully pushed away all the enemies except Li Chenglong, and even wanted to kill them in one strike. He did not leave any leeway and used all his strength, causing his defensive power to drop to the lowest point. However, it was equivalent to helping the archer achieve the third element that could severely injure him. This was really fucking wrong. When it came to it, after planning and scheming, the one who was schemed against was me. However, the most incomprehensible thing was, why did this bastard not have any aura at all? There was actually such a person in this world who did not have any sense of existence. As the Tao ancestor was unexpectedly seriously injured and exhausted all the potential he had reserved, the atmosphere of the battle became more and more cruel. Everyone kept attacking, and the Tao ancestor's counterattack became more and more ruthless. Every move he made was a fatal killing move. As time passed, the Tao ancestor was still holding on bitterly. He had to hold on. Once he could not hold on, he would still be defeated in this heaven's retribution. Hold on. There were only 3 minutes left in the shackles. There was no time. Everyone had already realized that even with Pai Yibao's unexpected arrow, which gave them a glimpse of hope, they would still have to pay a huge price if they really wanted to win. Life. The Flood Witch's eyes suddenly became deep. He quietly avoided the others, and at the same time, secretly raised his cultivation to loosen the lock of his divine sense. That was the preparation for self-explosion. Dijiang Tianwu and Zuwu also subtly moved under their feet. Suchonglu's eyes flickered, and he quietly moved to one side, not showing his strength. However, Wu Yuding saw his move. Mother's Wu did not stop him, but chose to move to the other side at the same time. Lonely in the netherworld, how can I let you go alone? Even if you are destined to die, you will still have my company, outside the arena. Yu Xingxian glanced at Wuchonglu's face. As old friends and brothers, how could he not see through Wuchonglu's intention? With a wild roar, Dong Huang was about to rush forward, but a figure was faster than him, so fast that it overtook him. Dong Huang's thought was very simple. His brother and sister-in-law were deeply in love, and if one of them died, the other would not live alone. He was a bachelor, and if he died, it would be better than letting any of them die. Therefore, Dong Huang was already prepared. However, the one who was prepared earlier and acted faster than him was Demon Master Kuan Peng. After so many years of interaction, Demon Master Kuan Peng admired Dong Huang the most, and the one he was most grateful to was also Dong Huang, even more than the respect he had for the Demon Emperor. He and Dong Huang were both friends and teacher, and they knew each other very well. This kind of situation was already very clear. Someone had to be sacrificed in order to achieve the set goal. Therefore, he came to a certain conclusion. The first one to be sacrificed must be Dong Huang. It must be him. This was because Dong Huang's temperament and style of doing things had always been like this. Dong Huang would never allow his brother and sister-in-law to die in front of him. Therefore, when Kuan Peng discovered East Emperor's subtle movement, it instantly burned its soul, potential, spiritual mind, and everything else. Then, it flew up at the fastest speed in its entire life and rushed over there silently. Translator, WQL Editor. Alim He overtook Dong Huang and rushed to the front of Dong Huang. The demon race could do without Kuan Peng, but they could not do without Dong Huang. If there was a choice, of course, I would die to protect His Majesty Dong Huang. He thought so in his heart, but he did not shout, because he knew that if he shouted, Dong Huang would never let him die. Even if he was one step ahead, he would still stop him. Even if he knew it was a futile attempt, he would still try. Therefore, Kuan Peng Demon Master directly took the lead silently. He was one step ahead of Dong Huang and faced the Tao ancestor directly. With a boom, the blue flame that burned the soul turned into a blue flowing light, swept through the crowd, and rushed into the battle between Zhuo Duo and the Tao ancestor. In the process of rushing to the Tao ancestor, he launched the most extreme self-explosion. The reason why he did this was that Kuan Peng knew that after the previous sneak attack, the Tao ancestor was stubbornly defending himself, intending to delay the last bit of time. He used more than 70% of his strength to defend himself. It was impossible to rush over with his own strength. It was simply wishful thinking to hug the Tao ancestor and then self-explode. Perhaps Dong Huang, whose cultivation was higher, could do it, but it was impossible for him to do it. With a loud explosion, thick smoke rose in all directions. Zhuo Chonglu and Wu Yuding were ready to rush. Because the two of them knew that Kuan Peng Demon Master's self-explosion alone could not kill the Tao ancestor. However, at this moment, two more figures rushed in without hesitation. They rushed into the shattered space caused by the explosion. The two of them did not say a word. They did not even let people see who they were before they rushed in. The two of them stood side by side, burning their souls, potential, divine senses, and everything. They rushed to the Tao ancestor, who was staggered by Kuan Peng's self-explosion. There was another loud boom. Yu Xingqian, Lei Changtian, these two seniors who had protected the human clan for tens of thousands of years, the peak of the human clan, did not even leave a word. They self-exploded to meet their deaths. Although they didn't say a word, everyone understood what they meant. Wu people of the demon clan had heroes who met their deaths. Did the human clan not have brave people? Zhuo Chonglu and Wu Yuding were ready to self-explode. But Zhuo Chonglu could not die. Wu Yuding could not die. Let us do it. They are much more important than me, and I have nothing left to live for. If either of them self-exploded, Zhuo Duo and Zhuo Xiaoyan would have a mental breakdown. That would be the end of the human clan. In that case, let me do it. This is Yu Xingqian. My daughter can't die. My son-in-law can't die. My boss can't die. My grandson and granddaughter-in-law can't die. If one of us has to sacrifice in exchange for victory, who else can I do it? This is Lei Changtian. When he saw Zhuo Chonglu and Wu Yuding's secret movements, Lei Changtian quickly made up his mind. In fact, he had already made preparations to sacrifice his life long before this. Lei Changtian did not feel regret about his death at this moment. Instead, he felt a little excited. Boss, this time you can't beat me. Ha ha ha. 3 people self-exploded in succession. 1 monster and 2 people risked their lives to defeat the enemy. The Tao ancestor was covered in blood and flesh. There were many wounds on his face. It was a ghastly sight. However, his injuries were not that serious. All the injuries added together were not as serious as the injuries caused by Pai Yibao's arrow. It was not only because he used more than 70% of his cultivation to protect himself, but also because a floating gourd floated in front of him. A purple gourd. A pure purple gourd, mysterious and noble. However, this purple gourd was unable to withstand the extreme self-detonation of 3 top experts. It was covered in cracks and riddled with holes. The little baby that could barely maintain its human form was on the verge of death, as if it would die at any moment. Wu Yuding and Zhuo Chonglu shouted in grief and indignation. Bastard! Who allowed you to go? Zhuo Duo was extremely angry. He waved his sledgehammer and rushed forward. With a light swish, the 8 gourds, led by the purple gold gourd, appeared at the same time. They moved over as if they had teleported, and surrounded the purple gold gourd. Then, the 9 gourds disappeared together. The purple gourd that helped the Tao ancestor withstand the self-explosion of the 3 top experts was the boss of all the gourds. It was also one of the trump cards that the Tao ancestor had kept for a long time. It had not appeared since the beginning of the battle. The purple gourd was the boss of all the gourds. Its power was beyond its peers. In addition, it had been carefully refined by the Tao ancestor for hundreds of millions of years. Its power was so great that even a sage-to-be might not be able to withstand a blow from it. It was because of this that Zhuo Duo did not activate the gourds to help in the battle, no matter how critical the battle was. The result of suddenly using the gourds to help in the battle was that the Tao ancestor would take away all the gourds. the situation would take a turn for the worse and get out of hand. Now, the Dao ancestor was trapped in the self-explosion of the three top experts and was forced to use the purple gourd to protect himself. Although he succeeded in escaping, the purple gourd was also seriously injured. His power was less than 100%. It was wrapped by the gourds and returned to the space of the Tower of Emptiness. At this point, the 9 innate gourds, which had no hope of reuniting, were finally gathered. Seeing the 3 top experts die, Zhuoxiao Duo, who was in so much pain that he wanted to die, waved his sledgehammer hundreds of times crazily, smashing the Dao ancestor until he staggered and lost his image. However, the ragged wounds on the Dao ancestor's body were gradually wriggling and recovering. The power of the 3 people's self-explosion was undeniable, but more than 70% of the power was borne by the purple gourd. In addition, their level was too far away from the Dao ancestor. Although they succeeded in causing more injuries to the Dao ancestor, the injuries were not serious. Instead, they were getting better. When everyone saw that the Dao ancestor's injuries were gradually getting better, ancestral sorcerer Dijiang leaped out. In his eyes, there was only shame. He used to believe in the Dao ancestor so much. He almost fell out with everyone for the sake of whether the Dao ancestor would do this. But he was wrong. Ancestral sorcerer Dijiang only felt that he was too foolish. "Boss, I'll do it." Zhu Wu Tian Zhu Wu gritted his teeth and pulled Dijiang Zhu Wu. Dijiang snorted and said, "You are not good at the power of space. At this moment, you must use the power of space of the highest level to be able to bind him. Otherwise, no matter how much you self-explode, it will only make him more injured. With his cultivation, he will recover soon. And now there is not much time. If you want to succeed, you must use the extreme method." Hearing this, the flood witch, who was about to rush out, was stunned. Yes, if that was the case, the so-called sacrifice was meaningless. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Dong Huang said angrily. If he had said so earlier, Kunping would not have to die. Dijiang Zhu Wu said indifferently, "Do you think you don't need any preparation to use the power of space of the highest level? When I was preparing, you rushed forward. And, even if I had said so earlier, I couldn't have stopped it. You know why they did so?" He wasn't wrong. Strictly speaking, these 3 people did not lack the opportunity to kill the Dao ancestor with their own lives. But they knew that their chances were slim. Their real purpose was more to not let the people they cared about die. Based on this intention, it would be best if they could kill the Dao ancestor, but if they could not, then they could not kill him. It was better to self-explode first than to let the people they cared about rush forward and risk their lives. If their expectations came true, it would be too late to regret for the rest of their lives. Dijiang Zhu Wu, who had accumulated enough power, flashed out. Like the previous 3 people, Zhu Wu's whole body and mind were burning. With the addition of the ancestral sorcerer's secret method, Dijiang's overall strength was 3 times stronger than normal. In a flash, he was already in the battle situation. The power of space was activated to the maximum extent. However, Dao Ancestor seemed to have predicted that Dijiang would do this. His entire body suddenly turned into specks of stars, and like water, he floated and rippled in the entire space. It could be said that he was everywhere, but nowhere at the same time. Dijiang, don't even think about it. When ancestral Magus Tianwu saw this scene, he rushed forward with reddened eyes. "Boss, good brother, let's go together." There was another soft sigh. A woman in white quietly appeared behind the Dao ancestor and reached out. The space, which was originally filled with the power of space, was reborn and suddenly solidified. The flowing figure of the Dao ancestor was also fixed. The woman bowed, and her pretty face was full of sadness. "Brothers, have a safe journey." It was Huda Zhu Wu who came quietly and intervened in this battle. This powerful figure of the Wu people, who had turned into reincarnation, once said that she would never meddle in the affairs of the mortal world again. But in today's battle, she still came and even joined the battle to restrain the Dao ancestor. "Ha ha ha ha." Dijiang and Tianwu laughed. "Thank you for your help, sister." The 2 ancestral sorcerers gathered together and took advantage of the situation. They turned all their power into a whirlwind of death and sucked the space that was condensed by the ancestral sorcerer Hutu into their bodies. Then, they exploded. Boom! The heroic laughter was still echoing in their ears, but the explosion that shook the universe had already sounded unprecedentedly. With a loud boom, everyone was forcefully pushed back several thousand feet by this unprecedented explosive force. All the space in the center was exploded into a black hole. However, the two Zhu-Wu had completely disappeared at this time and no longer existed in the world. The few people closest to the explosion couldn't help but bear part of the aftershock. Blood flowed out of their mouths, and their ears were full of rumbling. Everyone's eyes were red. In less than 100 breaths, 5 masters exploded one after another. This kind of tragedy was truly heart-wrenching, but now it was not the time to show grief. Under such an extreme self-explosion, was the Tao ancestor still alive? If he still didn't die like this, just as everyone was muttering in their hearts, they suddenly found that at the center of the explosion, in the black hole where all the space had not recovered yet, that there was actually a faint light that flickered unpredictably. Gradually, a broken figure quietly emerged from the faint light. It was the Tao ancestor. At this moment, he looked unprecedentedly bleak. His body was broken. His hands and feet were gone. His chest and back were blown open in many places, and half of his head was blown away, but he was still alive. Not only was he still alive, but the damage on his body was also slowly recovering. Although it was not as fast as before, it was still recovering, really recovering. At this moment, Zhuxiaonian's ice flame and Zhuxiaoduo's primordial fire poured into the Tao ancestor's broken body, converging and exploding. The Tao ancestor let out a roar. At this moment, his 5 forms were incomplete, and his whole body was broken. This roar was the sound of his soul. Everyone present felt a wave of confusion in their minds. This roar had the effect of shaking the soul. He was already so injured, but he still had the ability to attack the enemy, and under such a soul attack, no one could resist it. But, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared, and as soon as he appeared in the broken black hole space. The person who came was dressed in black, tall and straight. His hair was loose, and the demonic aura around him surged. He held a spear in his hand. That was the god-killing spear. Chapter 1434. The spear stabbed into the Tao ancestor's back. Boundless demonic qi instantly enveloped the Tao ancestor's body. The Tao ancestor turned his head in disbelief. In that instant, his eyes revealed a look of shock for the first time. Not to attack, not to recover. He just wanted to see who it was. Was it that person? His body showed signs of melting continuously, but this time it melted into tiny bits and pieces, and dissipated bit by bit in the void. He turned his head desperately and looked at the person behind him in disbelief. "It's you?" Fiend ancestor Rahu held the god-slaying spear and said silently, "It's me. Why? Zhuxiaoduo gave me a promise. He promised that I could go to his space and continue the mental demon Tao. After this battle, it's already a complete world, one that's even more complete than this ancestral land. Even if I don't want to go, I can leave this place safely and seek another development in the cosmos. Most importantly, he also promised to help me comprehend my mental demons. It's rare for a son of Providence like him to take the initiative to form karma. If you were me, what would you choose? And all I have to pay is not to cause trouble in this space. As for what I will do elsewhere, it's none of his business." The Tao ancestor said in disbelief, "But the conditions I promised you are better than this." Fiend ancestor Rahu said indifferently, "Unfortunately, I don't believe you. Since ancient times, it's rare for Taoists and fiends to exist. With the peak of the 3 races wiped out, will you let me go?" "Then you believe him?" "Yes, I believe him. Heh. Back then, you made an agreement with Pangu. But Pangu is long gone. Is Zhuxiaoduo really trustworthy?" Although Zhuxiaoduo is a despicable person, he has too many concerns in this world. Furthermore, he can't let go of them, just based on his human feelings. "I believe him." fiend ancestor Rahu said indifferently, "Fellow Taoist, it's been so many years. Are you really not tired? Why not die out for a period of time? The heavenly Tao of the ancestral land has been restored and can operate on its own. With or without you, what's the difference?" The Tao ancestor chuckled and said, "All right, all right, all right. It doesn't matter if I die for a while. Taoism and diabolism are both external and internal. I will definitely find you no matter where you are. You can't hide." Rahu said indifferently, "Perhaps when that time comes, you will no longer be my match." The Tao ancestor smiled faintly. The glowing powder that his body had turned into had already melted to his head. He closed his eyes and suddenly said, "Swashao Duo." Swashao Duo gritted his teeth and stepped forward. "What are you doing?" The Tao ancestor said indifferently, "I lost this time, but if you want to make me completely die, it's impossible." This was where Swashao Duo was filled with grief and indignation. Tao ancestors were immortal. This point had become fixed after he willingly merged with the heavenly Tao. No matter how much sacrifice he made, he could only die out for a period of time. In his bones, it was just a variable that affected the fixed number. In the end, it was impossible to really destroy him. As long as the great Tao was not broken, the Tao ancestor would not die. As long as the world of the astral souls still existed, no one could determine the life and death of the Tao ancestor. The most that could be done was to use this method to make the Tao ancestor die out for a period of time. That was all. At that time, he would eventually return. There is an end to the world, and the future is endless. There might be a way to completely destroy you in the future. Swashaodua's eyes were red. Hee. An illusory jade token floated out from the specks of stars on the Tao ancestor's body. As the jade token appeared, it became clearer and gradually condensed into a physical object. It was the creation jade disc. "You have been looking for this?" The Tao ancestor laughed faintly. "Take it and complete it. When I wake up in the future, I will find you and get it back." Swashaoduo grabbed it in his hand and said faintly, "I want to see if you have the ability in the future." The Tao ancestor smiled faintly. His eyes finally turned and looked at Zhu Yan, who was in a daze in the distance, and said faintly, "Encountering this thing. Indeed, it." Before he finished speaking, he finally dissipated completely in the air. At this point, the great battle of the century finally ended. Suddenly, the space shook inexplicably. It was the tattered Taiji diagram that fell from the sky. The energy of the Taiji diagram was almost exhausted. At most, there was only a trace left. After all, there were less than 10 seconds left before the end of the great battle. The danger of this battle had reached the extreme. Although everyone had won a great victory, none of them were happy. They were all heartbroken. The losses in this battle were truly too great. 6 ancestral sorcerers and 2 senior sorcerers of the sorcerer clan died in the battle. On the human side, the star-plucking celestial emperor Lei Changtian died. The demon race also lost the Kuan Peng demon master. Apart from them, Chan Shang was the first to die. Gong Gong Zhu Wu and Xian Ming Zhu Wu were the only ones left. They were trembling, kneeling on the ground with tears streaming down their faces. Of the 8 Zhu Wu, only 2 were left. The Flood Witch, the Raging Fire Witch, and the Dark Ice Witch walked over with heavy faces. "Seniors are worthy of respect." Great Flood Witch's throat moved a few times and said, "But why?" Gong Gong Zhu Wu understood his meaning. He took a deep breath and said, "We are Zhu Wu. We were saved by you, so we owe you. Also, we made the wrong decision in the battle which damaged the fate of the Wu people. In the end, we made a huge mistake which made the Tao ancestor wrong. If we want to die, we should be the first to die." Tears flowed down Gong Gong Zhu Wu's face. "Also, we are called Zhu Wu, but we can only go so far in our cultivation. We can't go any further. But you have a chance to go further. You have a greater chance to reach the peak. So, no matter how unhappy we are, we will never let you die. With us standing in the way, if the juniors still have to die, How can we afford to lose face? Flood and the others were silent for a while, then said, Seniors, deserve our respect. People were looking around in silence. Low sobbing sounds could be heard. They were Wu Yuding and Zhuoxiaonian. Zhuoxiaoduo felt like his heart was weighed down by lead. The battle was over. But Zhuoxiaoduo didn't feel relaxed at all. Indeed, this battle had been too fierce and bitter. Demon ancestor Rahu came to Zhuoxiaoduo. I hope you will keep your promise. Zhuoxiaoduo nodded and said in a deep voice, How long will the Tao ancestor die this time? Demon ancestor could be said to be the one who understood the Tao ancestor the most. He was the last person to send the Tao ancestor off. Naturally, he had the most right to speak. Demon ancestor Rahu said indifferently, At least, he won't wake up for tens of millions of years. Tens of millions of years. Zhuoxiaoduo calculated and said, That should be enough. Demon ancestor nodded. In that case, I'll take my leave. Before his voice died away, his figure flashed and disappeared. Everyone was trying in vain to find the remains of their dead comrades. However, after searching the entire space, other than the rock demon master who still had some pieces of flesh left behind, the others actually didn't leave anything behind. Everyone. Zhuoxianglu's eyes were red. He tried his best to suppress his emotions and said, Let's go back first. We'll deal with the funeral of our brothers. We'll meet again in a month to discuss important matters. How about that? Okay. Everyone had sorrowful expressions on their faces, and their hearts were abnormally heavy. Moreover, all of them were heavily injured and urgently needed to be treated. Victory. But this victory was so heavy. No one was even in the mood to celebrate this hard-won victory. It was really too tragic. It was a feeling that even if they died, it would be much better than the feeling now. Zhuoxiaonian leaned into Zhuoxiaoduo's arms and cried until the sky turned dark. Everyone went back one by one. They didn't even greet each other. The demons left first. They left quietly. Wu people left later. But they didn't even say goodbye. In the next month, the entire continent fell into an unprecedentedly oppressive atmosphere. No one dared to speak loudly. The Celestial Emperor, Heavenly King Yu, and Lord Lei Changtian had left one after another. Lord Devil Ancestor Lei Changtian had also perished in this battle. The atmosphere on the Star Soul human tribe side had dropped below freezing point. Even after a month of buffer time, they still couldn't walk out of this oppressive atmosphere. In the blink of an eye, the appointed time arrived. The higher-ups of the three clans gathered at the peak. Everyone gathered together this time. There was no suspense, and there were no more disputes. In this battle, Zhuoxiaoduo was the key to this battle. Not only did he force the Tao ancestor to a draw, but he even had the upper hand. His strength was obvious to all. Not to mention other things, just with this strength, it was simply stupid for the shamans and demons to start a war to defeat the humans and obtain the position of dominator. The sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe had been fighting against each other since the primitive times. They knew the importance of strength, so they had long given up the idea of fighting against the human tribe. This time, not only the higher-ups of the three clans, but also the higher-ups of all the clans on the continent. Demon ancestor Luo Ho also came. The Spirit Clan, Spirit Emperor, and Wan Mingsheng also came. Previously, they were persuaded by the Tao ancestor to fight in the war and fight for the protagonists of the world. In fact, the Spirit Clan was the final winner of the Clear Heaven tribulation that the Tao ancestor liked the most. Zhuoxiaoduo's luck was monstrous and unparalleled. But the creation plate that he collected was the key to the Tao ancestor's future breakthrough. It was something that the Tao ancestor had to get. Because of this, the Tao ancestor knew that there would be a final battle in the Bloodsea space, but he still participated. On the one hand, the Tao ancestor was very confident in his own strength. On the other hand, he was afraid that Zhuoxiaoduo's luck was too strong. If he gave him enough time to advance, he might advance to the same level as him one day. Even if it was only a complete world in one hand, the Tao ancestor could not accept it. Because if one world was complete, the Tao ancestor would not have the possibility to kill Zhuoxiaoduo. Therefore, the final battle was the plan of the three clans to jointly eliminate the Tao ancestor. At the same time, it was also the Tao ancestor's counterattack. Unfortunately, there were many unforeseen events in the final battle. Not only did space wizard Dan Kong sacrifice himself in exchange for Zhou Xiaoduo's complete small worlds, but also Zhu Wu Hutu reappeared and restrained the Tao ancestor with immeasurable merits. In addition, the demon ancestor betrayed the Tao ancestor in the end, which caused the Tao ancestor to suffer a crushing defeat and die. On that day, the situation was stronger than the person. The Spirit Emperor agreed to the Tao ancestor's kindness, but he also used the reason of mobilizing the army to delay the battle for 10 days. After 10 days, the situation changed again. Everything was settled, and the so-called war hegemony became yesterday's story. But also because of this, the Spirit Clan suffered the least damage in the Clear Heaven tribulation. They almost did not participate in the battle from the beginning to the end. The Demon Clan and the Wu people were sincerely envious of the Spirit Clan's complete state. They were too lucky. The Spirit Emperor looked at Wan Mingsheng with gratitude. If Wan Mingsheng did not try his best to stop them, the Spirit Clan would not be able to avoid being involved in this catastrophe, no matter what considerations they had. And as long as a single group of soldiers entered the battlefield and caused any casualties, the astral small bodies would immediately lead to the destruction of their entire race. Look, the Human Clan, the Demon Clan, the Wu people, the Demon Clan. Even if these 4 clans suffered heavy casualties, they still could not afford to offend any of them. The Demon Clan will leave this world in 3 days. All the Demon Clan above the flying heavens will be taken away. The Demon Emperor Dejuan was very straightforward. But those below the flying heavens will still stay in this world as the natives of this world. This was something that could not be helped. Even if the He Tu and the Book of the Luo could carry the Demon Clan, they could not take away all the Demon Clan. Naturally, they could only take away the Demon Clan whose cultivation had reached a certain level. Okay, Zhuo Chonglu nodded. In addition, I hope that a part of the Demon Clan will bring the Demon Clan's inheritance into Xiao Duo's world. This part will be led by the Azure Dragon, the Black Tortoise, the Vermilion Bird, and the White Tiger. This part of the Demon Clan will number about 30 million. Is it possible? Dong Huang looked at Zhuo Xiaoduo. No problem at all. Zhuo Xiaoduo thought for a moment. As for the matter of the Demon Clan moving into the worldlet, he had already discussed it with Xiao Long and Xiao Yiqiong. The new world was complete, and it was vast and sparsely populated. With so many Demon Clans moving in, there were only advantages and no disadvantages. Even if there was a follow-up, Xiao Xiao would be responsible for the coordination. Zhuo Xiaoduo did not need to worry about it. Well, after these Demon Clan people enter the new world, their future will depend on their own luck. The Demon Emperor sighed. The Wu people will leave in 7 days. Flood said, on our side, 30 million Wu people will also enter the new world. The leaders are Hai Hunshan, Thundercat, Shadiao, and the others. And these are your brothers. I have no choice. The Demon Emperor glanced at Flood and couldn't help but smile bitterly. The Wu people really had to compete with the Demon Clan at all times. He originally thought that because of his relationship with Xiao, he would have a foundation in the new world. He didn't expect the Wu people to be even more ruthless. Not only did they pull him out, but they also made so many brothers. But there's one thing I want to say. The Astral Souls Human Clan will not enter the new world. I will make some natives. Also, I will not participate in the management of the new world. Everyone will have to rely on their own abilities to survive in the new world. There will be no favoritism. Zhuo Xiaoduo said. Of course. How can the god of creation personally go into battle? Everyone expressed their understanding. That was how it should be. Demon Ancestor Rahu said indifferently, I intend to send some of the invisible inner demons into the new world. As for the demons outside, let them all be destroyed. I'm too lazy to take them to conquer the world. They're too ugly, too dirty, too smelly. They haven't even developed a fart in 1,000,000 years. They can't even create a shadow of civilization. What harm is there in killing such a race? The demon ancestor was decisive, but his expression was unprecedentedly gloomy. Everyone was stunned, but they couldn't help but want to laugh. Demon ancestor Rahu sighed. He couldn't help but feel depressed. He was also a race that had developed since ancient times. Look at the demon clan. At least they had reached a certain scale and had their own inventions. There was no need to mention the Wu people. They had already been modernized. The most awesome race was still the human clan. They had even developed to the point where as long as you had money, you could do everything in bed. Of course, this kind of behavior was not encouraged. However, after living in the human world for a few days, demon ancestor Rahu felt more and more that the demon clan was incurable. They were incorrigible and useless, not to mention anything else. Just the stench on their bodies made it impossible for them to even invent perfume then. It was simply unimaginable. Demon ancestor Rahu was a heartless person. Naturally, there was nothing he couldn't give up. Not to mention, he hated the demon clan so much. It was only natural that he would give up on them. As for the demon clan, Zhuoxiaoduo didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. Wan Minshang had been trying to enlighten the demon clan in the demon spirit forest for countless years. However, he hadn't achieved anything. He had even almost suffered a backlash. If it weren't for Zhang Xuejuan's accidental involvement, the demon spirit elders would have chosen Elder Wan as their sacrifice. Whether they had the strength to take down Elder Wan was one thing, but Elder Wan had the qualifications to lead the demon clan back. This was beyond doubt. Can you help me eliminate the demon clan before you leave? Following the principle of since you're leaving, it'd be a waste not to use them, Zhuoxiaoduo, who had always been lazy, asked Demon Emperor Jun and Gonggong Zhu Wu. This is no problem. The two leaders were happy to help. Humans were about to become the dominators. Obviously, they didn't want their hands to be stained with the blood of other creatures. Therefore, they wanted to let their two races leave with the sin of slaughtering an entire race. However, this wasn't a problem for the two senior executioners who had tens of millions of years of experience. Not to mention, they hated the demon clan so much that they wanted to kill them whenever they saw them. The monster clan and Wu people who enter the new world can first live in a separate city. After all, the new world is only in its early stages. It'll take at least half a year to a year. After that, they can live a normal life. Zhuoxiaoduo estimated the flow of time in the Tower of Annihilation. Well, Zhuoxiaoduo had officially renamed the Tower of Annihilation as the Tianzhua Galaxy. Yes, it was a galaxy. After the compass of creation was completed and the old view was repeated, Xiao Long excitedly told Zhuoxiaoduo that the current world of the Tower of Annihilation was no longer a separate small world. Now, it was a developing world, and it was an embryonic world with infinite possibilities. With the emergence of talents in this space, its fate would continue to increase. After seizing the fate of the heavens, it would slowly develop and expand beyond imagination. Therefore, Zhuoxiaoduo simply named his small world as a galaxy. What if it really developed into a greater world in the future? Then wouldn't I, the great Zhuo god of creation, be awesome? There were some dreams that one could still dream about. For Zhuoxiaoduo, who dreamed of being the grandson of the Sky Patrol Minister when he had nothing, this fantasy was just a drizzle. After all, there were already successful precedents. Although the Tianzhua Galaxy could only be called the Tianzhua Continent, it was about to take shape. However, this didn't stop Zhuoxiaoduo from looking forward to the infinite future. The Demon Emperor and Zhu Wu didn't have any objections to Zhuoxiaoduo's half a year's time. Half a year it was. What did this amount of time count for? They still believed in Zhuoxiaoduo's promise. In fact, they were somewhat envious of the juniors who were about to enter the Tianzhua Galaxy. This was because the things that Zhuoxiaoduo revealed had shown them the infinite possibilities of the Tianzhua Galaxy. It was much more promising than their current home world. The upper limit of development was also much higher. However, they couldn't bring themselves to do so. Secondly, they were all proud people. This time, they were going to explore the universe without any restraints. Could it be that they couldn't become the master of another world? Perhaps they could reach the same level of achievement as Zhuoxiaoduo one day. They could open up a new world and become the god of creation. How great would that be? Gonggong, the Xianming flood, Emperor Juntai, and company all had such thoughts. Even fiend ancestor Rahu had such plans. Open up a new world. Become the god of creation. This was their future path. This was their goal for a very, very long time to come. Wan Minsheng looked at Zhou Xiaoduo with some apprehension. Friend Zhou Xiaoduo, the spirit race. Zhou Xiaoduo said straightforwardly, the spirit race will not commit the sin of killing. We can follow the example of the Tao League and integrate the humans into the astral souls. We can also bring our inheritances into the new world. Anything is fine. Zhou Xiaoduo was very generous towards the spirit race. The spirit emperor and Wan Minsheng laughed bitterly. The entire race entering the new world? This was definitely a good thing, an extremely good thing. However, the spirit race wasn't so thick-skinned. Apart from the higher-ups, we are willing to disperse the humans into the astral souls and help them rebuild the ancestral land. As for the new world, let's send 50 million people. The spirit emperor's words were filled with embarrassment. After all, this number was already 20 million more than the Wu people and the Yao race. It was a bit of an advantage. However, the spirit emperor and Zhu Wu didn't hold any grudges against this at all. The spirit race's fighting strength was far inferior. Even if they sent in 20 million more people, they could only protect themselves. When the new world developed in the future, it was still unknown whether these 20 million spirit race people could survive. In fact, to Zhou Xiaoduo, whether the spirit race fully integrated into the astral souls or entered the new world, it was a very good thing. Based on the current situation, the humans were strong while the spirit race were weak. The spirit race had become a vassal of the humans. In the future, the spirit race would definitely become the human cultivators' cultivation partners. Just this point alone was something that the Yao race and the Wu people couldn't compare to. As for the 50 million spirit race people entering the new world, Zhou Xiaoduo felt that it was a bit too little. The new world had just been established, and it needed the greater 1,000 creatures. The spirit race mainly lived on flowers and trees, and they were much more adaptable to the environment than the shaman and Yao race. As for the higher-ups, it was inevitable that they would still have to leave the new world. Next, everything was settled, and the various races began to celebrate the long-lasting peace that was about to come. Demon ancestor Rahu didn't participate in this celebration. He only scattered a part of the heart demon of the first generation to Zhou Xiaoduo. He didn't care whether Zhou Xiaoduo would really fulfill his promise or not. He just crossed the starry sky and left. The demon ancestor knew that no one would really welcome him, including Zhou Xiaoduo. If the situation wasn't so critical, they wouldn't have chosen to cooperate with him. Demon ancestor Rahu was very tactful. In addition, he didn't want to be associated with most people. Naturally, he left in a carefree manner. As for the future, he didn't care about the demon race or the heart demon. He could do whatever he wanted. The Tao ancestor had said that Tao and demon couldn't coexist, but they were also two sides of the same coin. As long as the Tao ancestor didn't die, the demon ancestor wouldn't die. Tao was eternal, and so was the origin of the demon race. The heart demon was the heart, and the demon was born from the heart. How could it not be long? When he left, the god-killing spear called Yen Shursi over. Then, he ordered Yen Shursi to transform into his human form and stand at attention. He slapped Yen Shursi more than 10 times. Yen Shursi was slapped until he spun like a top. However, he was very excited. Each slap was an inheritance. The god-killing spear used this method to leave his inheritance and gave it to Yen Shursi. Traitor. Do well. Traitor. Become stronger. Traitor. Was it good? Good. After the war, the entire continent was in ruins. Less than 10% of the population of each race was left. Everywhere was desolate. As the war came to an end, white banners were everywhere. Almost every family was wearing mourning clothes. Monuments rose from the ground one after another. They commemorated the heroes and martyrs who had sacrificed themselves in the past few years. At the front line, it was a different scene. All of a sudden, the people of the Wu tribe became very popular. The experts of the demon race invited them to drink, and the human race also invited them to drink. They were all old rivals who had fought with their lives for so many years. Now that they were going to leave forever, it was reasonable for them to send each other off. However, they had to drink this farewell wine no matter what. Although the humans of the astral souls were comrades who had passed away at this moment, they had to deal with these guys first. After all, if they left, they would be done once and for all. They were willing to leave this period of time and leave behind some memories. During this period, Duo had to train with the flood which almost every day. They continued to exchange pointers, continued to exchange blows, and continued to exchange their insights. The flood which was very emotional. I didn't expect that the biggest opportunity in my life was to be given a godson when I was transforming into the mortal world. Zuoxiaonian and Duo were still like before. One of them poured in the luck of the flood, while the other drew out the luck of the flood which. However, as Duo became the new god of creation, his providence increased exponentially, and the amount of providence that Zuoxiaonian absorbed was negligible. Thanks to this, the great witch of the flood could be said to have advanced very quickly. In just a few days, he had advanced by leaps and bounds to the peak of the wizard ancestor level. He was only half a step away from breaking through. I don't have much time left. I'll leave the rest to the starry sky. I just want to drink now. The flood which was full of reluctance. Your father and I need to drink more. After this farewell, I don't know if we can see each other again. On the other side, Gong Gong, Xianming, and Hutu were sitting together. Sister, come with us. The clear heaven tribulation is over. The old rules of order in this world are gone. Half of the 6 paths of reincarnation is gone. It's futile to maintain it. Besides, the Tao ancestor will definitely recover in the future. You have karma with him because of the previous battle. By then, it's okay. Hutu was very calm. When the 6 paths of reincarnation was established, I was no longer a magus. I only controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation. When the ancestral land was split, the great Tao was in chaos. That was why the 6 paths of reincarnation became chaotic and disappeared. Now, as the world is restored, the ancestral land is restored, and the 6 paths of reincarnation is also recovering. The 6 paths of reincarnation is me, and I am the 6 paths of reincarnation. We are inseparable. It was my heart at the beginning, and it is still the same now. As for the karma of the Tao ancestor, you don't have to worry about it. He has been following the great Tao all his life. However, in the last battle, what he did was against the great Tao. I joined the battle because I followed the great Tao. Why should he blame me? Don't worry. Hutu said calmly, I'm willing to protect all living creatures in this land. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, souls to Hutu. I'm not just talking about it. I'll watch over their souls, and they'll be reincarnated. I hope that all the people in this world can have a hope and a fantasy, no matter rich or poor. I hope that in this world, good will be rewarded with good, and evil will be punished with evil. In this life and the next life, karma will not be satisfied. Besides, I want to guard the resting place of my brothers. If we all leave, I'm afraid that my brothers will be lonely. Gong Gong and Xianming raised their heads inside. All right. The fragrance spread for thousands of miles. The wine flowed over the 9 continents. On this day, the leaders of the other continents were all dressed neatly. They gathered before the graves of the heroes who had died in the last battle. Brothers. Gong Gong Zhu Wu and the flood which almost choked with sobs. We're leaving now. They wanted to say goodbye, but they felt their throats were choked. They couldn't say a word. At this moment, the invincible powerful beings who had dominated the starry sky couldn't even say a word. Those powerful beings who didn't even bat an eyelid were now crying. They were sad. The smell of incense and candles covered the sky. All the powerful beings bowed to show their respect, their faces solemn. Demon Empress Shi hugged Xiao Xiao tightly, her tears falling like rain. Yiqiong, you have to be good. Mother, you and father. Take care. He Tu and Luo Shu unfolded. The Demon Emperor, Dong Huang, and the Demon Empress floated up, carrying the He Tu and Luo Shu with their people. They slowly soared into the sky. The three of them kept waving their hands. Demon Empress He's beautiful eyes locked on Xiao Zhao's face. Her tears fell like beads from a broken necklace. My son, you have to be good. Mother. Kneeling on the ground, Xiao looked up with tears streaming down his face. His mother's tears fell from the sky and dripped on his face. He gently stroked them with his hands and put them into his mouth. That it was so sour, but so sweet. It was an indescribable taste that would be etched in his heart forever. Mother! Xiao burst into tears. In the sky, Emperor Jun let out a long sigh. He held Shihi in his arms and waved his hand. The two of them turned into shooting stars and quickly disappeared into the sky. The monsters left. Then it was the Wu people. The flood which stood in front of Zhuoxiaoduo and Zhuoxiaonian, smiling. I wanted to wait for your children's 1-month-old celebration before leaving. But you are such a disappointment. Zhuoxiaonian blushed instantly. She stomped her feet. Godfather. Flood laughed. Let's go, let's go. Don't be annoying. He waved his hand casually. Zhu Wu, Lai Hua, Bing Ming, and the others soared into the sky and soared into the sky. The Wu people left very casually. In less than 10 breaths, they all disappeared. Flood is really straightforward. Zhuochanglu felt a little regretful. He said, he didn't even shed a tear. Although they were in a heavy mood, they couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. Yun Zhonghu and Bai Yun Duo stood on the side, leaning against each other. Among everyone, perhaps only the two of them were the most relaxed. They even felt a little happy. Bai Yun Duo was pregnant. They went to Yu Dongtian's tomb to report. Without Brother Fishy, they would have turned into ashes. As for the child, it was even more impossible. Yun Zhonghu and Bai Yun Duo simply built a house in front of Yu Dongtian's tomb. They lived here and accompanied Brother Fishy for a long time. Perhaps, if I got closer, he would be able to shift the blame to me if he caused trouble in that unknown world. This was Yun Zhonghu's most ardent wish recently. However, everyone in the team was working hard to cultivate and improve. They were not inferior to when they were preparing for the Tao ancestor. Now the boss has taken a big step forward. We must work hard. Our next path is to transcend this world. Travel the starry sky with the boss. Become the creator of the world. Create our own world. We can't let the boss monopolize the limelight. Except for one person, Li Chenglong was working hard in another direction. The cave abode of Ying Zhao that he had obtained in the Crown Prince's Academy was also cultivated as a prototype world. Li Chenglong had never forgotten the oath he made back then. If I succeed in my cultivation, I will definitely make the ordinary plants in the world have the ability to transform into spirits. This was Li Chenglong's promise. He was also working hard in this direction. He wanted to make this wish come true in his new world. But everyone was already clear in their hearts. In the current world, it is impossible to get enough opportunities to create a new world. Zhuo's experience can't be replicated. Even if there are opportunities, they are in the starry sky. We need to fight for them and obtain them. Everyone was ready to go to the starry sky. Zhuochanglu and his wife were also working hard. Now that the human race in the astral souls was the dominant race, the heavy responsibility of protecting the human race could finally be relieved. Compared to staying here, how could it be more comfortable to transcend this world and travel the starry sky with their son and daughter? Wu Yuding wanted to help Zhuoxiao Duo coax their child. Time would not stop for anyone or anything. It would fade away bit by bit. 9 months later, Yun Zhonghu and his wife held a big banquet. Their son was born. Everyone was gathered together in a lively and bustling manner. Yun Zhonghu held the child and respectfully asked Zhuochanglu to name him. Zhuochanglu and Wu Yuding glanced at Zhuoxiao Duo and Zhuoxiaonian from the corner of their eyes. Let Xiao Duo and little Nian name him. Wu Yuding snorted and said, Look at how cute the child is. Zhuoxiaonian looked at him with a red face and couldn't help but love him. She cheered and hugged him in her arms. She smiled and said, This is so fun. Wu Yuding was speechless. Then why don't you give birth to one for fun? Zhuoxiaonian blushed and stomped her feet. Mom, you have to ask your son-in-law. Duo rolled his eyes and pretended not to hear anything. He drank with Li Chenglong. However, the matter of naming was still brought up. Duo racked his brains and said modestly, "How about Yun Xiaohu? Get lost." Yun Zhonghu cursed. "Yun Zhonglong? Get lost," everyone said in unison. "Yun Zhonglong. Get lost. Don't Yun Zhonglong. Yun Zhonglong, what do you think?" Yun Zhonghu pondered for a moment and nodded. "Yun Zhonglong." Zhuchanglu sighed. "Sigh, little Yu A few months later, little Fatty Yu's wife, Emoshwani, also gave birth. Everyone cheered again. Little Fatty was drunk. He hugged Duo and talked a lot. "The royal family came to us. They said they wanted to make the Yu family the royal family. The emperor should abdicate to the Yu family. I didn't agree. The ancestors fought for mankind, not for the Yu family to be the emperor. If I agreed, the Yu family would have tarnished the two ancestors' reputation. Besides, we're living much better than the royal family now. Boss, give the child a name." This time, Duo pondered for a long time and didn't joke. Because he knew that as long as he said it, little Fatty would agree. This was no longer a joke. His words were the law. What generation is it? The next generation is the Ping generation. Then let's call him Yu Pingshang. Okay. Another year later, Duo once again displayed his prowess. With the 9-9 cat hammer, he smashed his team that was not strong enough. "Get lost. All of you, get lost. Why are all of you staying in this world? Why aren't you leaving when you can? Staying here and eating my food. When will you be able to repay your debt? Everyone owes me too much. The least one owes me 36 million continents worth of wealth. If you don't go out and work hard, how are you going to repay your debt? Do you really think you're a jack of all trades?" Duo swung the 9-9 cat hammer and chased away this group of shameless people. "Don't even think about coming back. I've already left a soul imprint on you. If I want to confirm your current location, it's a matter of minutes." Duo threatened. "Hurry up and go to work to repay your debt." Everyone left awkwardly with bruised and swollen faces. Before leaving, Li Chenglong, Long Yuxing, and the others went to Qin Fangyang's grave and kowtowed to bid farewell. In fact, they all knew that they had no choice but to leave. With so many great cultivators above the sage level gathered on this continent, even Zhongguang's ancestral land could not bear it. Not only Li Chenglong and the others were kicked out, but even Duo himself would be kicked out soon. "Dad, Mom, where are we going?" "I don't care where you're going. Your mom and I are going out to play." Changlu snorted and said, "Anyway, we have a soul imprint. As long as you two don't give birth, we won't come back. Let's see how much you miss us." Xiaoduo's face turned bitter. Xiaonian's face turned as red as a tomato, the kind that was ripe. If they wanted to have a child, it would be a matter of minutes. However, Duo felt that he was not ready to be a father yet. In comparison, he still wanted to spend a few more years with his wife. Once they had a child, his wife would no longer be his alone. Duo knew this very well. Countless novels, legends, and myths all proved this point. "Then you two should go. When I miss you, I'll give birth to a child and call you. When you think about us, you should always think about us," Duo said heartlessly. With Father Zhua and Mother Zhua's current cultivation level, even if they met a Tao ancestor again, they could still fight with him. Moreover, they had a good chance of winning. Therefore, Duo was really not worried about the old couple's safety, not to mention that he had sent out a whole team, and they were all connected by soul. Even if something really happened, they could organize a group fight with just a soul message. Duo felt that in this vast starry sky, there were only a few people who could withstand his group fight. Therefore, Changlu and his wife also left. After a period of time, Duo let his fully formed small world, which was flawless, graze the starry sky and let it develop on its own. "Xiao Long, Xiao, do as you see fit and have fun. Don't come to me if you don't have anything to do. If something happens, don't come to me. I'm old, and my mentality is old. I can't handle things. And Hai Hunshan, Mighty Cat, Sha Diao, you guys, I've fulfilled my promise to you. When you have the strength to travel the starry sky, come to me again. I promise that one day, I'll let you join my team. Zhou Xiaoduo said so. Xiao Long and Xiao Wahuang's sword were dumbfounded. You're old? You're obviously lazy, and you don't want to do anything. What are you looking at? When I miss you guys, I'll naturally come to see you. Zhou Xiaoduo waved his hand and threw the new world far away from the Milky Way. Then he and Zhou Xiaonian returned leisurely. They had their own private time together. The two returned to Phoenix City and lived in their old house, just like the Zhou couple who had transformed into the mortal world. When they had nothing to do, they would visit Hu Ruoyun's house from time to time. Occasionally, they would stroll around Phoenix City's No. 2 high school. After half a year, they finally felt that the atmosphere was too peaceful and comfortable. Especially in the starry sky, there seemed to be a voice calling them. Under the guidance of karma, the two of them broke through the sky. On the other side of the distant 9 heavens, a few people were discussing. Who's on this kid's side? I don't want him. He's too lazy. Even a salted fish is more hardworking than him. I don't want him either. He's too despicable. You can imagine his future reputation. Why don't we just let him form his own faction? Junxie, you can consider forming an alliance with him. Come on. Bear me. I don't want to have my face covered in blood every day. Chuyang, you have enough people on your side. Even if it's not enough, I don't want him. He's my son. We're not. I'm jealous. Ha 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 ha. Yi Xiao, you. Don't call me. I'm all alone but this kid. Just go away. Everyone was silent. After a while, with a sound, someone else came. Suddenly, everyone's face turned bitter. A voice winked and said, "Ah, you're all here. Come and take a look. Am I more handsome today?" Everyone covered their faces. Suddenly, the guy in the middle's eyes lit up. Tan, you came just in time. Didn't you always complain about not having an ally? Now your ally is here. You two are a match made in heaven. There is nothing more tacit than that. The new guy was very excited. Really? I have an ally? After so many years, I've been pushed around by you guys. Finally, I have a partner. What do you mean by a match made in heaven? Is it a beauty? I'm a married man. What are you thinking? We mean that your partner is very, very powerful. He can be on par with you in terms of cultivation and other aspects. That's great. Where is he? I'll go find him. From now on, we, the Starry Sky Twin Swordsmen, will travel side by side in the universe. Puff! That's right. From now on, the name of the Starry Sky Twin Swordsmen will be invincible in the universe and the universe will be silent. Ha 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 ha. Thanks for the compliment. I feel relieved. I suddenly feel a bit more handsome. Roar. Ha 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 ha. Zhou Xiaoduo naturally didn't know that a bunch of shameless guys had set up a huge trap for him. He was traveling around with his wife, looking very carefree. At the same time, he was also working hard on his martial arts. Zhou Xiaonian was confused. What are you doing every day? I'm restoring something. It's very difficult. What is it? A flower. In the starry sky. These two little things still don't want children? He really doesn't care about the two of us. I'm so angry. If we don't hear from them in half a year, we'll go back and play doubles. Okay. On the continent of astral souls, Hu Ruoyun looked at her daughter, who had grown up, and frowned. Look at you. You're already so old. It's time for you to think about your personal life. Li Qingyue sighed. I'm the principal of Second High now. I have a heavy responsibility on my shoulders. I'm not in a hurry to get married. Martial artists have long lives. Why are you guys in such a hurry? You're an old lady now. Do you know that you're going to stay at home for the rest of your life? I have my own salary. It's not like I'm living off my parents. August mid-autumn. Li Qingyue sat quietly on the roof and looked at the bright moon in the sky. The moon is so round. Her beautiful eyes stared blankly at the moon in the sky without blinking. The sun in the day is also very round. Why can't the sun in the day meet the full moon in the sky? She sat quietly and looked at the moon in a daze. Her hair fluttered in the night wind. Her eyes were in a daze. She seemed to be reminiscing about something. When she was young, there was a pair of warm hands and a person who accompanied her for a long time. Even now, she could still feel the warmth of that person in the palm of her hand. Drip, drip. 2 drops of tears fell on her lapel. I don't like a round sun. I like a square one. But a square one? When will it appear? When will you come back? She hugged her knees and sat quietly on the roof. She looked at the moon. Her expression was calm. After a long time, something seemed to fall from the sky. What was that? She widened her eyes and looked at the sky. She couldn't help but reach out her hand. It floated. Floated? Was this a flower? It was crystal clear and dreamy. There seemed to be a faint glow on the petals. Red spider lilies. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.